And a very good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you might be in the world. I hope you're all very well. And this is the ProSynth Network live show, episode, I think, 96 now. Getting close to the 100th show. I've got a bit of an echo there. Where's that coming from?
I can hear that.
Yeah. Hang on a minute. Let's try that. Ah, yeah, it's... Yes, we know who that is. We'll just mute him. No. It's all fine. Right, okay. Technical hitch out of the way. Let's crack on with the show. First of all, hello to everyone that's in the chat room. Welcome. Thank you for joining, and I hope you stick around. We've got some really interesting people on the show and a fantastic guest this week, so get ready to ask your questions. Also, can I just remind you that if you haven't already, would you please like and subscribe and share the show? That would be fantastic. Just hit the like button. It's down, like, I think there somewhere. That would be fantastic, and I'm sure you've all subscribed, but if you haven't, if you're new, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to be told whenever we do anything. And if you know that there are people out there that would like to watch the show and don't already, please share the link as far and wide as you possibly can. If you want to donate to the show, because that's how we keep going, there are a couple of ways of doing that. First of all, you can do that in the YouTube chat, using super stickers and those associated things. That's fantastic. And of course, if you want to donate, you can do. Again, the link is in the description underneath the video. There's the link on the screen. All your donations are just so very welcome. We thank you ever so much. And we do put that money to good use. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And of course, finally, if you want to keep in touch with us outside of the show, then it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course YouTube, all at ProSynth Network. You can find us at all of those places there. Right. I'm going to introduce our very special guest in just a moment. But first of all, I want to bring in my fellow co-hosts. First of all, the man who started it all for us, is all his fault, honestly. Ben Simpson, how are you?
I'm all right, yeah. I'm a little bit rushed. Had a bit of a panic getting here, but I've managed to get here like a couple of seconds before we went on.
Yes.
I've recently took delivery of. You can't see it because it's out of focus, but
you've moved it over to the side now.
Yeah, got the. Let's see if I can turn that blur off.
There you go. You should leave the blur off, mate. We like seeing what's behind you.
Yeah.
Keylab 88 Mk.II.
Yeah. I've
nice.
I've been putting it through its paces. It's pretty decent. I was hoping that it was going to replace everything down that end of the studio, the business end.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to like faff around with loads of different bits doing different stuff, but it doesn't quite do that to the level that I would want. So it's been relegated to the side. Because there's DAW functions there, but the very basic DAW functions.
Yeah, but no, I agree. I mean, I've got a Mk.I 61 key, and I love the way it integrates with V Collection. That's the one. The V Collection integration is superb. It's so much easier to manipulate all of those instruments with that keyboard. But as you say, the DAW integration is it's basic. I suppose it's just simple, but I suppose it all depends on your DAW. I think you were having trouble with Cubase, weren't you?
It seems to struggle with Cubase, but all the problems I was having with that weren't there when I tried it with Logic. But I just can't. I can't get into that way of working. So it's going to have to be one or the other, I think. But I've got the little CC121.
Okay.
And that's brilliant for controlling Cubase. It's what it's made to do, and you can pretty much do everything from that. So I'm not going to get rid of that. I'll keep that, and I'll work between the two. When I'm over here, it does enough. I can record and move it about and that.
You've got another piece of new gear, haven't you? Right below your chin.
Ah, yes. Yeah, somebody's... I keep moving dead close to it because somebody's commented in the chat that I'm not loud enough. But as you can see from my delicious metering...
Got a fancy mic with lights.
Yeah, I'm getting a good signal there, like so.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's when I move it here, I suppose. It's
I'll tell you what. Did you connect it via XLR or USB?
It's USB.
Okay, I reckon we need to get that cloud lifter and XLR that in, and that'll give it a bit of a boost.
Right. Excellent.
Cool. Sort that out. Well, and that was one of the examples of how we use the money that comes in to buy the gear to make us sound better and look better. Cameras are next, and then you'll see how ugly we really are. Let's bring in our very special guest this week, and we do have some guest co-hosts, and you'll notice I said co-hosts. But first of all, I want to introduce you to this gentleman, who, if you haven't heard of him, you will have almost certainly played some sounds designed by him. And we'll go through the resume of Drew Schlesinger very soon. But first of all, welcome to the show, Drew. How are you?
Doing just great, thank you.
Lovely. Nice little background you've got behind you there.
Yeah, I'm traveling down south, and where I go, my synthy goes. So I brought it.
Fantastic. Oh, that's brilliant. That's absolutely. We'll try and get you to give us a small demo of that a little later on. But so whereabouts are you at the moment?
Sarasota, in Florida.
Excellent, in Florida. And how is it down there? Is it nice and sunny and warm?
It is nice and sunny and warm, which makes people who are up north very upset.
Yes,
when I say that, because
it makes us
through snow and cold.
No, we don't have the snow, but it is very cold here in the UK and the rest of Europe, I think. So, but listen, it's fantastic you've joined us. You are primarily a sound designer and a composer, and a synthesist. You've been going for, you've been in this game now for many, many years, and we'll explore that in more detail a little bit later. But you have programmed sounds and patches for some of the biggest synthesizers that have probably ever sold in the last, 30 or more years.
Yes, there's 200 devices, either hardware and software, somewhere in that neighborhood over the years.
Amazing. And you've just also released a set of recordings from many, many years ago when you had a very small studio in New York. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in 1980, I had moved to New York, and I'll tell just a little bit about it. I lived on the corner of 58th and Madison, which is a really weird place to live. And anybody who knows who Divine is of Pink Flamingos, they lived upstairs.
Wow.
And I had a little closet, and I had built a studio in there and started recording a bunch of synth pop songs. And they've been sitting, I pressed 2 cassettes at the time, probably maybe 20 or 30 of each. And they've been sitting unreleased since then. I decided after the album I did with David Torn, which was done in '78, which we released about 2 years ago, I decided I'd look through them, found about 8 songs that I really liked, and just put a little album together and got them remastered and put it up on Bandcamp.
Awesome. And we'll come to that a little bit later on in the show. But welcome to the show. Thanks ever so much for taking the time out to be with us for the next couple of hours. And I'm sure that if anybody has any questions for you, then please do throw them into the chat. Ben is sat there waiting. He's going to be knocking them into a little bucket so that we can come through those and put those questions to Drew a little bit later on. But we often have it's almost like a hot seat where we roll through a number of special people that come and join us on the show because maybe they've got something in common with our guest, or maybe we just like to be in their company. And I think we've got a bit of both of that today. I'm going to go first of all to a friend of the show, a fellow FM nerd, somebody who's been a massive inspiration to me and whose sounds have graced many attempts at songwriting in this little room. We're going to cross to California and say hello to Manny Fernandez. How are you?
Greetings, everybody. How we all doing?
Very well indeed. You normally just kind of pop into the show on a Friday, but you're with us today for the whole show. I mean, how fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going on holiday tomorrow, and I decided to take a day off to wrap up some loose ends on some projects, and otherwise not be stressed about getting on that plane. So I decided that today's the day for me. So.
You have a slightly different backdrop to the one that we're normally used to seeing.
I have a very different background today. The studio is in other usage. Had a scheduling conflict that I had forgotten about, and it's being used in other purposes at the moment. So
this is the refined classical Manny Fernandez.
This is the jazz Manny Fernandez.
Very nice.
Yeah, very nicely. Well, listen, Manny, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's great to have you on. And I know that between yourself and Drew, you've worked on so many of the great synthesizers of the last 20, 30 years. So I'm sure there'll be some nice crossovers there. Finally, because we have a second co-host this evening. He is the author of Synth MS-1. He has his own internet radio show. He's incredibly knowledgeable about all things synth. It is Dr. Mike Medley.
People in the computer.
Hello. We've got a bit of echo coming back from you there.
Hang on a moment. I'll mess with my echo cancellation. Let's see if this works. Is that any better?
Let's see. Perfect. There it is.
All right.
Excellent.
Hey, everybody.
Hey,
it's awfully good to be back, as always.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen you. How have things been with you?
I can't complain too much. I will, however, communicate some of the dialogue that's going on right now in chat. Wagyu wants to know how many operators that synth behind Manny is, and we're trying to decide if it's 88 operators or if it's one operator over 88 triggers. Yeah. Anyway, it's awfully good to be back. What's new? I'm working on a new book.
Please say Synth MS-2. Please say Synth MS-2.
Honestly, that's research for that is going on in the background. Research on that really began while we were doing Synth MS-1. The actual project that's near to the press, of course, I can't talk about.
Of course,
because as they say in the UK, it's more than my job's worth. Other than that, though, doing great. Radio show's doing fine. Hopefully getting a little more warm weather, getting some music done.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on and filling in those considerable hot seats that we have. Let's get everybody up on camera. Look at this. I don't think we've had a live show with 5 people in it. So this could be fun from my perspective, trying to make sure that we get everybody in the shot at the right times. So forgive me now if that all goes wrong. So as per usual, this is a music technology show. We talk all things synth and nerdy, geeky stuff along those lines. And usually the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about some of the news topics of the week. And this since Christmas, or actually since before Christmas, news has been slow but steady, and it's starting to pick up a little. So we're going to talk about a few things, and then we'll get right into talking with our very special guest Drew, and talking about his career and everything that he's done and everything that he's doing now. So first of all, let's bring up our first news topic of the week, and this is a rather cool duo of instruments from 1010 Music. Let's bring up the first one here. This is the Fireball. Let's just do that, and we get it onto the screen, hopefully. Technology problems already. There we go. So yeah, the Nanobox Fireball wavetable synthesizer. And there is the Lemondrop 2, which I'll bring up in just a moment. But these are really, really small touchscreen polyphonic synthesizers. Let's just have a quick look at this video here.
Hey, this is Drew from Patchworks, and I am happy to introduce the new 1010 Music Nanobox series. Here on the left, we have the Fireball, which is a wavetable synth, and then we have the Lemondrop, which is a granular synthesizer. If anyone knows 1010 Music, they've been doing some great touchscreen USB-powered devices for a while now, and this is definitely, I think, a great addition to that line. So yeah, let's get into it. So as you can see, the build quality...
I think we'll stop there because that's more of a demonstration video rather than a kind of an audio example there. But it's wavetable and granular synthesizers in tiny little boxes even that are smaller than a book of matches. Looks like it. They're absolutely tiny. But certainly kicking out a punch, but also £399. I saw somebody say today that they bought both of those, and then it dawned on them that they could have bought an iPad and had change left over. And was that good value for money? But I suppose, if you're looking for a USB-powered pocket-sized synthesizer with a bit of kick, these things are maybe up your street. Let's go to our guest first. He gets first honours here. Drew, I know that you haven't had a huge amount of time to have a look at these, but first impressions of pocket-based synthesizers with touch screens. I mean, this is definitely the future, isn't it?
It sure seems to be. You see a lot of small devices coming out, and 1010 has done some, from what I've seen, some really amazing devices in terms of recording, and their blue box mixer and the black box. So they really seem to have focused on small devices with great interfaces that are really powerful, and pretty cheap. And you see a ton of tabletop synths, people playing with tabletop as opposed to the DAW. So I think they may be hitting a sweet spot. I haven't gotten a chance to look at the interface, but so far the other ones that I've seen, they really do a really good job on the interface, and having a touch screen on a small device for that price, it sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seems like a winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the trailers they showed was this guy sat down at home with his tiny little nano synth and was doing stuff, and then just picks it up, put it in his pocket, gets in a cab, goes to the studio, plugs it in, carries on working there, and it's all very nice and neat. But could you, I mean, personally, I'm getting on, I wear glasses, a little touch screen. I'm not entirely sure I'd feel 100% comfortable in that. What about you, Mike? Are you a fan of these nano boxes?
Well, I have to sort of take this from a couple of different directions. Specifically, there is I've got a history with 1010 music. I have a number of people that I work with who uses them, and they're great machines. They have an incredible amount of power under the hood. They're very well designed. I had actually thought about getting a blue box or a mix box for myself for some time. But my issue, which is something that people have brought up a fair bit in chat already, is that as cool as these boxes are, I've got a box that can do potentially everything that they do, sitting right over here. And it also, lets me get on Zoom, watch Netflix movies with my wife, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a big proponent of iOS, for folks who don't know. And thank you, Sasquatch. That's actually very true. But there are people who are simply going to say flat out, we don't want to use computers. We don't want to use computers. And there's always going to be a market for people who don't want to use computers. And given that, I would say, also considering the fact that the 1010 music stuff is such amazing quality, and the audio you get is not going to be dependent on whatever interface you have your iPad hooked up to, there are going to be people who really like them. One of the things that people have to watch when they use something like an iPad is option anxiety. I've got 200 plugins on that iPad, and it's very easy to get distracted. And if you want to focus and get into the creative flow, a little box that only does one thing but does it really well, it isn't a bad idea. I'd like to play with them. I'd like to actually get my hands on them just because I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Manny, are you a fan of pocket synthesizers? Do you prefer things that you can plug wires into now?
Well, I want to pick up a little bit on what Dr. Mike said, which is, it's a whole paradigm of the portability is really, I think, what's going to really attract somebody to it. Their history of all their products, and I chased down every video that everybody had out there already to hear these. They sound phenomenal, and they picked some nice synthesis systems that can work well with their interface. And it appears that touchscreen is working well from the videos. The little inclusion of the sequencer and little motion sequence stuff in it is actually pretty powerful. And I was impressed. It's funny, I had not found out the cost of them until a little bit later. And so to Dr. Mike's point, it's like if the form factor and portability and dedicated one function per box is important to you, it does seem that they can find a nice niche for that. From the comment in the chat, you should have a frame to put that in your Euro rack. Then you can take it out and put it in your pocket on your way home. Double function.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have a nice, their Euro rack series of their bit boxes and stuff.
Yeah.
Are really quite cool too. But for me, I just looked at it. Looked like it was easy to use from the panel, old eyes notwithstanding, and they sounded phenomenal.
Yeah, they do. I think personally, if I was to pick one, I like the Lemondrop one, which is the granular synthesizer, because wavetables have kind of got that covered, but granular is really interesting, and I really like that. So that would be my one. So last word goes to Ben. You've just bought yourself a whopping great 88 key controller. Would you like to pop one of these in that little empty space on the right hand side and use that to control it?
You could probably fit about 5 of them there. I'm a bit confused over it, really. It's portable, but the technology that's in it is probably well surpassed with what's in an iPad. And so when you said that guy realised he could have had an iPad for the price of 2 of them, you can do so much more with it. I get the option anxiety that Dr. Mike was on about, but surely that makes more sense because you can use it for other things as well. These are just dedicated little boxes that do a job well, but they're expensive for what they are, and I'm not into like loads of little bits everywhere. So for me personally, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
That was the whole point of me buying that, is because I want to get rid of bits. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not like one of these like doorless jammers that have all kinds of modules everywhere. I can't do it. But I forgot what I was on about now.
That's all right. That's par for the course.
I'll jump in and save you. I was going to say, and this was, I think Nick Batt mentioned this on Sonic State. They have the same form factor. They have the same buttons and controls and nomenclature on there. Wouldn't it be cool if you could swap the firmwares over? Because I'm guessing this is probably the same hardware. It's probably, one of these small computing boards running a dedicated application, and they've just got, a granular, firmware and a wavetable firmware. Wouldn't it be great if you could buy one and then get the other one for, half the price or even a third of the price, and then just you have the best of both worlds? I don't know.
You can do that with their Bitbox Eurorack stuff, right? They have
Sorry?
Their Bitbox, their Eurorack stuff. They have the sampler and the synthesizer and stuff. And I think the firmware is you can just swap them in and out.
Ah, right. So they've got a history of doing it.
Oh, yeah. And the desktop versions are the same.
Cool. Well, there you go. That would be interesting to see. Launch them individually and then say, a little bit later on, now you can swap the firmwares around. And if you've bought one, you don't have to, spend another $400. You can just spend 150, say, get the firmware and then swap between the two. I don't know how easy or difficult that would be. Maybe that defeats the object. I don't know. But anyway, that is the Nanobox, the 1010 Music Nanobox. And there's the Lemondrop, and there is the Fireball. The Fireball's the wavetable. The Lemondrop is the granular. They retail for $399. They are available now at all good music shops and some bad ones as well. Let's move on to another topic. Let's see, what should we do? Let's do this one, because this is a lovely, lovely thing, and it will not cost you anything. So if you thought that the Nanoboxes were maybe a little too rich for you, then here's something nice and free and lovely, and it sounds amazing, and it has an illustrious history.
Recorded at his home in New York City, this is Philip Glass's beloved piano. His primary instrument for over 30 years. Discover the unique sonic personality of this baby grand with a range of sounds. This is what it sounds like. And because creativity shouldn't be complicated, we've made it into this. And best of all, it's free.
There we go. That's lovely. Oh, nice piano sound. This is Spitfire Labs glass, Philips glass piano. I think it's just called glass piano. This is sampled his baby grand that he has in New York City. And this is not a small instrument, but it is completely free. It's about 850 megabytes.
Oh yeah, they don't skimp on these.
Oh, no.
The labs are incredible. If anybody isn't using labs right now in their DAW, just go out and download them all. It's unbelievable what they're giving away for free.
Well, they kind of release, like, I think it's around one a month. So you know that for the next year, you're going to get 12 free instruments, and they're going to be different to most other things. And even the stuff like the Philip Glass piano is done in such a lovely Philip Glass type way.
There are about 40 of them right now for people who have never explored them before. Wow. It's going to get to the point where I'm going to do an entire album in labs just to see if it can be done.
I'm sure it can. I'm sure it can, because there's all sorts. There's atmospheres, there's instruments, there's rhythms and percussion and all sorts of things. And of course, it must be a way of them grabbing attention and getting you into that Spitfire world, which I'm sure it's very, very successful at. Ben, did you like this one?
Yeah, I've not got a bad word to say about it, really. And with getting that controller as well, it's been such a distraction. I've not got anything done that I was supposed to get done. It's just, you sit there at that with your glass piano, the lovely action on there as well. So the next thing you know, it's like 5:45 in the morning and you're supposed to be going to work. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, it's brilliant. I've not got anything bad to say about it at all. It's free, it's quality, it's got loads of character, as all the lab stuff has. That's what's great about it. It's not like soulless. There's little flaws in it, and as we know, we all love imperfections, and this is full of them, but in a brilliant way. It's a cracking set of sounds.
Absolutely. Manny, you're sat there in front of a rather lovely looking piano there. Thoughts on this one?
I didn't have a chance to check it out. It was the one thing that I did not get a chance to go to. So other than hearing that little demo, I had not heard it, but I have downloaded some of the other Spitfire stuff, and as you guys say, it's their stuff's fantastic. And how can you argue with free?
Absolutely. There are some apt glass-based jokes going on in the chat room. I've just caught that one from Keith in Watford. It's free, so it's less of a pain. He's here all week.
Try the deal. Tip your server.
Indeed. If you have any more jokes relating to glass and stuff.
I have a Philip Glass story, but it'll wait until my turn.
Okay, we'll do that. Drew.
Oh, you're half full of it.
So, Drew, your resume, which we will go through in detail shortly, is full of hardware synths, but you've also got quite a number of software instruments on there. As far as software instruments like this go, does this impress you?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, as everyone said, Spitfire's done some amazing sample-based instruments. The fact that it's free, I'm a Philip Glass fan since, 1970s. So I think what's not to like? It's got a unique sound. It's free. Their interfaces are really interesting.
Yes.
So, if you want to get a different sound, it seems to have a warm and mellow, and as Ben said, a slightly imperfect sound, which always intrigues me. I'm not always interested in something that sounds perfect in every note. So, it's great.
Lovely, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the interface there. It is that custom Spitfire interface that we're seeing more and more of across their products, and I'm hoping that eventually it will take over from their contact-based stuff, because I'm not a huge contact fan, and it just frees them up to be used by anyone without the added cost of that host. Who haven't we asked? We haven't asked Mike what he thinks about this.
Well, I'm a big fan of pianos like this. It doesn't matter whether it's Philip Glass or Oliver Arnold's. I love that whole thing. There's an entire subgenre of ambient music called piambient, or we like to call it, which is basically piano-based stuff. And sounds like this are always worthwhile. And this is Philip Glass, and to hear his inspiration and be able to get at least a little bit of it under under your fingertips is nice. I actually got to meet him when I was very young. He was touring, doing small shows with his ensemble. This would have been 1980, 81. And he was touring the Photographer, the album he did about Edward Muybridge. And I got to see, I chatted with him a little bit. Very nice man, very gracious. And I got to see him live on stage at the Finney Chapel in Oberlin College. And the thing that was so funny about him was that he wouldn't let anybody mix the ensemble. The ensemble was mixed from somebody on stage. So there was somebody sitting on stage with the ensemble around them in a semicircle. And this guy was on stage, and all of the PA was firing past him. So he had no idea how much bass he was throwing out, right?
Yeah.
And the bass player was using an ARP Explorer, which was cranked to 12. And he was rattling the stained glass windows, and it was unbelievable. It was basically your typical drum and bass rave 40 years earlier. And I went up afterwards and I asked about it, and they just kind of shrug and say, we do what sounds right to us.
Yeah.
But that I love the lab stuff. I think it is just an amazing gesture on the part of Christian and all the guys at Spitfire. They're tip-top people, and keep them coming. The one thing I don't know about labs and about this new engine that they're doing is, you talk about them eventually replacing Contact. I have no problem with that because I'm not a huge multi-sample user, but my impression is that when you talk about key switching and articulations and that sort of thing, Contact gives you a lot more flexibility. Am I wrong?
Yes and no. I think the BBC Symphony Orchestra, it's the interface is very similar. It has the circle graphic that you can then assign to different functions, but underneath it you can then pick and choose your articulations. But it's quite easy to navigate, and I think you can hotkey it as well. So it's a pretty straightforward and very graphic interface, and I'm all for graphic interfaces. Whereas Contact, if you've got a really nice scripted interface, it can look really, really nice and work well. I just don't like the fact that you have to have Contact to get some of these libraries, and that can be an obstacle for many people. It certainly was for me for a while, because a lot of the Contact libraries can only be used in the full version of Contact and not the free Contact player. Whereas with the Spitfire stuff, if it's using its own interface, it's its own interface, and it comes with it as standard. So,
I've never been a fan of native instruments in general, and I don't do enough heavy duty sampling to get into Contact. It's sort of a hobby of mine to find people who are trying to do what Contact does, who aren't Contact, just to see how far they get. You have all these bizarre sampling engines out there, if you know where to look, that are just these random things, and some of them are fun. Best Service Engine is way up there on my list.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, if you're a fan of Spitfire Labs and you like what you see, I do implore you to also check out pianobook.com, which is Christian's side project, which is absolutely chock full of, as you might imagine, lots of pianos, but also lots of other things as well that have all been community sampled, and a lot of them are available in multiple formats. And the free format they use on there is Decent Sampler, which is a very basic sample playback engine, but it is completely free of charge. It's loads of stuff, absolutely loads of stuff on there. So if you like labs, go and have a look at Piano Book. Right, let's talk about something else that is free, because we like free stuff. Anything that enables people to make music without having to dig too deep into their pockets. This popped up on my radar. I'm not entirely sure how new it is, because I couldn't really see, but I'm assuming it's fairly new, because I sniff out the freebies like a good old truffle sniffing pig. And this is WaveArt's Convology XT Vintage Reverb Effects, and it is completely free of charge. It comes with 74 impulse responses built in as standard, and then you can add to that, you can pay for packages of various different IRs. but there's so many in there as standard. And as you can see from the graphic here, let's see if I can bring that up full size. You've got some really cool stuff in there to get yourself going with. And I thought as a reverb effect that is free of charge, that has got some of those classic 80s and 90s boxes in there, for free, you just cannot go wrong. And I was having loads of fun with this. It's a really nice, easy to understand, easy to use, very good quality reverb. And I know that we've kind of been overrun with lots of software reverbs lately. Our favorite recently was Reverb Foundry's Tai Chi, which is a superb reverb. But this is great, and the fact that you can you get this whole thing for free. You get 74 IRs in the free package, and then you can add to those, and it does feature all the classics in there. It's just very, very good. Ben, did you get a chance to download and check this one out at all?
I did, yeah.
Way!
I've got it up and running at the minute. I think that's what's on that now.
Oh, right, okay.
Piano sound. It's really good, as you say. It's free. It's got a load of stuff that comes in there as standard, but you can also buy. I think, from what I could gather from the website, you can buy additional impulse packs to go in there, and they've got like different machines covered in the packs, haven't they? So it's brilliant. It's a great idea to give you the initial thing free and then to expand it, with the paid content.
But also to give you the initial thing for free with 74 options already built in. I mean, normally you might get half a dozen or so, but
you get plenty in it. Yeah, it's very useful. I'll be using it, like you say. I mean, we've probably found our perfect reverb with Tai Chi, but this, if you're not lucky enough to have Tai Chi, get this. It's free and it sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to bring this up here. So these are the packs that you can buy, and each of them has different, a whole bunch of different stuff in there. So there's the True Stereo libraries 1, 2, and 3, and 4. There's also the main library as well. So they're just a huge amount of stuff in there. And if you want those classic 80s, 90s, and beyond reverb units, this is a great way to do it. Who should we go to next? Let's talk to Drew. You've done some stuff for effects over the years, not just synthesizers. So did you get into impulse responses at all?
I have, yes. Actually, I haven't tried this one. I use the convolution reverb, that engine that's in Live.
Oh, yeah.
And over the years, I've just scoured the web and I've found an unbelievable amount of impulse responses. So, but it looks like a brilliant idea from their point of view, to give you something that's got a lot of value and looks like it has a nice interface. 74 impulses is pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then being able to buy some extras if you want.
Yeah, indeed. Mike, what do you think about this one?
I am a huge fan of Wave Arts, and I have been for a long time. I wouldn't call Bill a friend, but he and I chat when we can. They really go under a lot of people's radar, and that's a terrible pity. They have one of the best simple, low-load, good-sounding channel strip plugins out there. And their reverb, their algorithmic reverb, Masterverb, there was probably a 4 or 5 year period in my creative world where whenever I went out and played live, Masterverb 4 was my reverb for treating stuff in live shows. This is a great offering. It'd easily be worth 50, 75 bucks with what you get. They're giving it to you free. And yeah, sure. Like they say in the South, it ain't buying the dress that gets you. It's the hat and shoes. They're going to want to get you to buy those. I think it's over 2,500 IRs that they've got. But as was pointed out by Ben and Manny, you can get your own impulse responses. You don't have to use theirs. Yeah, they'll take anything, and there are some phenomenal impulse responses out there that are available for free or very low cost. I have a good friend named Daryl Bergen, who for a while was running a company called Spirit Canyon Audio, and he was one of the first people to produce these really insane impulse responses for convolution reverbs. And these things, everybody says, well, you don't have that many controls on me. The algorithm doesn't go very deep. You're relying on, this chunk of thing in memory. And my attitude is, basically you're talking about a sampler, and people don't have a problem with samplers. So, I think it's great. I think that anytime you can get new technology into people's hands is wonderful. And this is a great way for people who have only been using algorithmic reverbs to try convolution. It's a very different flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always like something with a nice graphic interface, and the fact that you can see the unit that's being impulse responsed, if that's the right term, is always nice to see. I like a nice graphic interface. Manny, did you get a chance to have a listen to this?
Yeah, I did. I played with it for a good 45 minutes last night, and I got through about 24 of the presets. I thought it sounded phenomenal. I really did.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of stuff in the DAW space anyway, but compared to some of the stock stuff that comes, with Logic and all that kind of stuff, it's like I like the controllability of it. It's simple but effective, and they have a really wide range of options under the ones they supply free. And like Mike said, this could easily be a $50 plus plugin for how good I thought it sounded, how easy it was to use.
Yes, it's a really nice interface.
It's a bonus if you can put your own stuff in there. I think it's funny that people would complain that you can't change them that much, but imagine for a minute you were going to the space where they recorded that ambient.
Exactly.
Like, you think you're going to move the wall? I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But no, it was great. Stuff. And the best part was, they touted, recent version updated. So even if it's been around a while, it loaded fine and played fine on my M1 iMac. So
nice.
M1 compatible.
Good to hear. There you go. You heard it here. Plays nicely on an M1. Good stuff.
Does anybody know how to make their own impulse responses? Because I remember somebody mentioning to me that they use drum loops as impulse responses.
You can. Ben, any audio file can be used as an impulse response. You can get some really bent stuff if you throw in things that were never meant to be impulse responses. But there are free and relatively inexpensive impulse response kits out there. You go into the space you want, you set up your microphone where you want, you set up, and then some people, play white noise over a speaker, some people do a sine wave sweep, some people fire a starter pistol, some people, slap Kent Spong to get a yelp. And then you sample that, you model it, and you take out the original sound, and what's left is an impulse response. But it's not that difficult, and there are tools you can find out there that make it pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I remember when Propellerhead, or Reason Studios as they're known now, introduced impulse responses into their reverb unit in the Reason rack, and they provided a whole bunch of lessons on how you can create your own files and then just dump them in, and you could they were impulse responsing every room in the Propellerhead office. Just to say, this is how easy it can be. This is the kitchen, this is the cleaning cupboard, this is our office space. So you could just mess around. So, it seems like it's a bit of a rabbit hole to fall down into that. And according to our friend Dominic, Mr. Wiggly, who has his show every Sunday at 7 p.m. UK, there is a built-in impulse response recorder in Logic. Who knew? I didn't. No, I didn't know that, so I shall be exploring that one. Anyway, that is WaveArt's Convology XT is available now. It's free of charge from wavearts.com. That's all you got to do. Just go over there, and I don't even think you have to register an account. You can just download it, and away you go. Let's move on to a little bit of sad news here. Oh, there you go. Mr. Wiggly says it's built into Space Designer. That's where you can find that in Logic. So a little bit of sad news that came across the wire this week, which I think we can all kind of just say what this guy achieved in conjunction with a few others was nothing short of incredible. Before we talk about him, I want to play this little video demonstration from way back in the day. It's a fascinating thing to watch, so please do enjoy just a few moments of the very late Jon Appleton. Whoop. And there we go. That is Jon Appleton demonstrating the Synclavier 2 as it was in 1984. Jon sadly passed away just a few days ago. He was one of a trio of people that worked on and developed the Synclavier for New England Digital out of Dartmouth College, I believe, way back when, in the late 70s. And it was one of those super powerful computer-based musical instruments that were prevalent at the time, the Fairlight, and it just blew everything out of the water in terms of wow, what this thing could do. You know, FM synthesis, later on sampling, onboard sequencing, all of this kind of stuff. It was just a miraculous piece of equipment, and I think that we can all agree that, you know, the Synclavier had the same impact as things such as the Fairlight in popular and modern music, and also in the avant-garde as well, which obviously Jon was, you know, kind of more leaning towards that side of things. I just wanted to gather some people's thoughts on Jon and the impact that the Synclavier may or may not have had on you, or his music may not have had on you. Let's go to our very special guest, Drew, first of all. Your thoughts on Jon Appleton?
Groundbreaking, transformational, just a brilliant guy. As you said, it was him and two other people who I can't remember their names. I actually saw them demo the first version, which was sort of a square box. Wasn't as elegant as the Synclavier 2 in a hotel room, I think it was, in New York. And it was just, you know, pretty mind-boggling to hear those kind of tonalities coming out. It was FM really, you know, you had analog synth, and here you had something completely new. Yeah. So pretty brilliant.
Yeah, there's an image there of the Synclavier 1, as you say, just kind of three wooden boxes with a whole bunch of PCBs in there, and the top one was the disk drive, I believe. Very, very primitive. Now, Manny, if I'm not mistaken, you'll probably be able to correct me on this. They sub-licensed the FM technology. So Yamaha licensed the FM technology from Stanford and from Dr. Channing, and then they sub-licensed this to New England Digital. Is that correct?
That has what I have heard has happened. As many things, you know, happened back in these days before, you know, IP was like the potentially malicious thing it is now.
Yeah.
You know, FM was an academic discovery, and so a lot of academic stuff gets freely traded and morphed around. So, you know, they had their system, and then after Challenge was licensed, from what I understand, it was nothing that was a big deal. It's just like, yeah, they're using it. It is that implementation, so whatever. But the biggest thing about Jon Appleton and the whole evolution of that, you know, that system really became the world's first DAW.
Yeah.
You know, in LA here in particular, there's a number of big studios that had the full-blown system with the 96K hard disk recording, the timbre frame resynthesis, 4 racks of stuff. Like, you know, I saw the picture of Cy just getting, you know, his.
Yes.
You know,
PMST system.
You know, back in those days when they and Fairlight were really pushing each other's to do all this massive stuff, that the company had a huge impact. But what I did not know till much later, towards the end of the 80s, was what a prolific composer he was. And very much in the avant-garde space. And so I found a lot more interest in catching some of his compositional work more than his technical stuff later on, or to appreciate it just as much. So yeah, it's a big loss, because the team of them at Dartmouth there really did a lot of things with the system that really was, I hate to say it, irrelevant to the fact that having to use FM as a base engine. Just integrating all those parts together. They really set the path, you know, along with the Fairlight guys, of what became the modern DAW.
Yeah, absolutely. Sidney Alonso and Cameron Jones were the other two gentlemen that developed the Synclavier over at New England Digital. After it was I think the way I understand it, that Sidney and Cameron were working on this at Dartmouth, and then, you know, formed the company beyond that, and then, you know, started to sell these things. Frank Zappa, great user. Laurie Anderson was another very famous user. Of course, you heard that sound towards the end of Jon's piece, the kind of iconic gong sound. I don't know the original patch name off the top of my head, but that was just an incredible sound. Mike, any thoughts on Jon Appleton?
Too many, I'm afraid. These days, while may his memory be for a blessing, and I mourn with his loved ones, these days losing someone like Jon has become very personal for me. We were supposed to have the synclavier in Synth Gems 1, and he was going to be one of the people I interviewed.
Right.
But the machine that was offered to us for photography, we didn't realize until we got there that it had a huge chunk torn out of the chassis.
Oh, no.
It was in dreadful shape. And we said, well, we've got plenty of other stuff. We can always come back to it. And then something like this happens, and you realize that you can't always come back to it. So it is very much, sorry about that, it is very much on my mind that these are people we need to talk to while we can. I've never met Jon, and I'm very unhappy with that. I actually have one of his textbooks, the one he did with Pereira on the basics of electroacoustic music, that I still refer to. And the stuff that the synclavier has done is incredible. Cameron Jones is still at this.
Yes,
he's actually released a complete model, a software model of the synclavier FM system, not the sampling, that runs on iOS. It's called Synclavier. Right. It's called Synclavier Go. And what's so funny is you can also get a hardware attachment, which is the velocity sensitive spring loaded knob. So you can spend $30 on the app, and you can spend $150 on the knob. which I think is kind of cool. And also, the Synclavier was the platform for the world's very first sample piracy.
Yeah.
Buffy St. Marie was a huge technology forward user. People think of her as a folk singer, but she was actually a genius in the studio. And she had created this entire synclavier library of her own voice, which was called Cenovox. And when the hard drive on her synclavier started having problems, she shipped it back to NED. They pulled the data off of it, and one of the folks there said, "Hey, these sounds are really good. Let's start handing them out." And she didn't find out that other people were using her libraries until records started coming out. So there you go. Another pioneering thing that the synclavier did.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a very, very important instrument, even though it's one of those kind of unobtainium things, although our friend Simon Alexander has just proved that if you persevere long enough, he's just picked up a PSMT full, I think it's a 9600 PSMT with everything that looks like it's a stack of filing cabinets and massive wood paneled stuff, and that's the so I have the Synclavier app just on my iPhone.
Synclavier Go, that's the one.
So and it's great fun, and I also have the Arturia version, which again Cameron was involved in developing, so that replicates the whole FM element of that. So it's it's easy to get into the wonderful things that it did.
People say that it is the best sounding sampling device ever. There are people who swear by it. We also lost a guy named Peter Freeman, who was a bassist who played with John Hassel last year. And he was a complete devotee of the synclavier and scoured the planet for parts to build out a huge system, and was convinced that nothing sounded as good.
Yeah, it did. It certainly prided itself. Is that a word? Prided? Yeah, it prided itself. I'm going to say that. Yeah.
I think it was final specs, wasn't it? 24-bit, 192K.
It was massively
ridiculously high sample rate.
Yeah, because the Fairlight Series 3 was it was 16-bit, but 100 kilohertz mono or 50 stereo. So that was pretty high for 1985. But the Synclavier just went way beyond that in terms of its audio quality. It's a stunning piece of equipment and some amazing sounds. Ben, do you use any of the kind of modern versions of the Synclavier? Has that ever been an impact on your musical?
Yeah, when it's come to recreating these tracks from the 80s, you find out that it was used an awful lot. Like Tainted Love, for instance.
I know.
So that was Synclavier, and they're not typical examples of it. You know, that's everything in Tainted Love to me sounds synthy. You know, it doesn't sound FM or sampled. So it was a very capable machine, and the price tag reflected that. I think it's such a loss when these great pioneers go. It just makes me feel sad that we were losing these people that came up with these great leaps in technology. You know, it's because we don't seem to have that level of ability anymore. It's like, or maybe technology's moved on so much that it just isn't possible to. But it just seems all this groundbreaking stuff, like the stuff that Bob Moog did, and
that's a discussion for another time, Ben. I'll happily argue with you over that.
But it just to me it's even more sad because of, you know, that seems like a period that, to me anyway, is disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I've, I get terribly upset that we're not recording and documenting these people as much as I think we ought to be. And I know that, you know, there are, places, that are recording or documenting these people within, within literature, but also, NAMM do a great oral history program, and they're capturing, bunches of people that way. But we really do need to make a concerted effort to keep these people's work and memory going, way beyond any of our lives. So it's it's definitely something. And as you mentioned, Ben, Soft Cell. You think, this fledgling weird synth pop act of the early 1980s here in the UK, but their biggest hit was created mostly on a synclavier, which was just wow. And there were other users who.
Someone in chat mentioned Eddie Jobson's album "Theme of Secrets," which is basically a sales brochure for the synclavier. It's a beautiful album, and he got way into it. He's one of these people who would choose, one platform and just dive in. He couldn't be bothered to have a whole bunch of machines lying around. And so he got into it, and he went bananas. It's a great album. I just got the reissue that came out with a reissue of it with his album Green. And gorgeous stuff.
Definitely, yeah. Depeche Mode, another big user of the synclavier. They didn't like the Fairlight, went with the synclavier. Even our guest last week, Martin Ware, was much more impressed with the synclavier and used that far more across many of their recordings than anything else there. So Jon Appleton has sadly passed away, but he led a very long and productive and fruitful life, and we will remember him for a many a year after this. So thanks for everything, Jon. Let's just move on to one other piece of. I'm going to drop one or two things here, but let me talk about. I'm going to do this quick snippet one. We don't need to comment on this one, but I just thought this was a slightly interesting piece of information that I saw, and I did want to kind of share a slightly personal experience here. So there's a musician here in the UK. Her name is Victoria Hesketh, and she often goes under the name of Little Boots. That's her kind of nom de plume, and she has just released, or will be releasing, her brand new album, and she released the artwork for it just the other day. And this is probably, it's got to be, I'm sure, the first time that a piece of Behringer gear has featured on the cover of a pop music album. People like to pose with all sorts of wonderful things, but Victoria is posing with an MS-1, and I just thought that was quite interesting, for no other kind of reason at all, that it was interesting that a Behringer piece of gear isn't going to appear on a mainstream pop album cover. I haven't heard any of the tracks yet, but Victoria is also going to be in ABBA's house band when they launch their Voyage virtual experience in London later this year. There is going to be an actual live band playing at the time, and she is doing all the keys work in the band. So she's pretty good, and she's been around for a long, long while. She made the Tenorion quite famous over here for a while. She was doing a lot of work with that piece of equipment, which I could not get my head around.
This ABBA thing that you're going on about, is that where they've recreated
Yeah.
the ABBA members with modern technology.
There's all kind of holographic kind of stuff going on. Yeah,
it's a bit like Behringer, then, isn't it?
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah. See, there's a connection. Yeah,
there's a connection. Yeah. No, I've got my tickets for the ABBA Voyage gig. I was fascinated just to see from a technology perspective how they pull it off. So I'll be interesting to see how that all goes. But Little Boots, her new album is coming out very shortly. Tomorrow's Yesterday's, with a Behringer on the cover. So they've kind of made it, I suppose. I don't know.
Anyway. Ken Spong says, is she just about to throw it into the sea?
Well, maybe there is something there.
That's where she found it, yeah.
Found it, yeah. Tossed away on the beach in Blackpool, which is where that photo is taken, by the way. Just down the road from Jamie, I think, there. So, there you go. I just thought I'd throw that one in. Finally, let's just talk about this, because it's FM, and we have...
of course it is.
So, I've got backup. I brought the troops in today. So we were going to talk about this last week, and I've just got to do a little bit of technicals. There we go. We were going to show this last week. Oh, there we go. We've got somebody using it already. This is it Bleass or Bleass?
Bliss.
It's Bliss. Oh, right, yeah.
Yes.
Because they spelt it like that.
Of course it's Bliss. It's FM.
Of course it is. This is the Omega synthesizer.
He'll be here all week.
Yeah, this is an FM synthesizer.
He's over there. Yeah.
Let's have a quick listen. Quick listen to the demo here. Interesting way to end your video there, but there you go. That is the Bleass Omega synthesizer. It's an FM synth available on desktop and iPad. Look, everybody knows I like my FM. I thought that was an interesting take on it. It's a very simplified graphic user interface, almost very kind of Arturia DX7V like in its design. Not saying that they've copied or aped that in any way. It's nice and colourful, it's nice and flat and nice and clean, and it sounds really rather good. It's available on both desktop and iOS. I'm going to go to our FM expert in the room, which is definitely not me, Manny Fernandez. What did you think? What did you think of this, Manny?
I thought they found a nice little starter slot for people to get exposed to it, because at some level it's basically a DX9 engine, but it's got some wave shaping and it's got some filters, and it's very easy to use because 4 operators is kind of a sweet spot for people that are starting out. If you don't want to really get into the weeds, you can just get a nice timbre, dial in some filter motion on it. The motion sequence and that other stuff is really cool. The assignable mods are cool. One thing that's nice is that, unlike some other systems that are legacy type that we're fans of, you can freely control all the operators in real time from multiple controllers.
Yeah.
So there's some potential there outside of what they showed in the demos. If you're doing some ambient things, you can do some really sweet real time control of it. So I thought it'd be a pretty. I think it's a good first step for people that maybe want to get into it without having to get into traditional DX stuff. And I'm really happy to see that it's the sounds, or let's put it this way, that it's getting a renaissance in different packagings for people, because people were turned off of FM because it was so odd to basically program a spreadsheet. And now there's so many ways to get into FM that are simplified. And I think it's great because, It's my
the world needs more FM, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've almost got enough, but I'm still looking for a couple of pieces.
I just wanted to share this before I go over to our iOS expert in the room, who has got a copy running right there. But this is on the Bleass website, and what I wanted to kind of highlight was the fact that it is an iOS and a desktop, Mac or PC version, but you look between the two, and they are very much alike. So it's a really nice, way that they've kept everything nice and familiar, whether you're using it on the desktop or the iOS platform. So, what do you think of this, then, Mike? You've got it. You must have used it. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Not many. I haven't had a chance to dive into it as much as I would like. I am a huge fan of Bleass. I buy virtually everything they have. As I have often said, I consider iOS apps to be sort of the exception to my rule of not sort of filling your boots with a bunch of stuff that you may or may not use. I think that spending money on a product being developed by a small developer is basically like a charitable contribution. Even if you don't use it very much, you're helping them, with new ideas. And maybe products 1 through 8 don't do it for you, but product 9 blows you out of the water. And Bleass has this amazing record. They've got so much good stuff out there. And the thing I have to say, and the FM purists will sneer at me, is just
you ready,
that,
Manny?
is just that. No, this is essentially repeating what Manny said from the side of someone who is, I think, not into FM, is probably, like saying that Hitler had socialization issues. But the way they have laid this out, you can look at it and you can say, my God, I think I've actually got an idea of what's going on in here. Yeah. There have been plenty of people who have tried to make FM synthesis more accessible. And the classic example of that is Operator in Ableton Live, which is this astoundingly impenetrable user interface. There's a lot going on in FM, to be honest. It's an amazing way of making sounds, and it's never been fully exploited. I'll give it that. But the nice thing about this is, if you want to say they've dumbed it down, hey, that's fine. But they have created an interface where someone can sort of look at this and say, what happens when I do this? That is something, unless you own a DX1, you can't ever look at an FM, and the Synclavier is the same problem. They mimic the original user interface, which was monstrously bad. Yeah. You can't look at an FM synthesizer and say, what happens when I do this? And the thing I love about Omega is that it's an FM synthesizer where you can look at it and say, what happens if I do this? Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to make that same comment, Robbie, is that the way it lays out just that first page, it's very DX1-esque. And that it shows you the envelopes, it's got the numbers, it's got the picture on the side. So
cute little picture of the algorithm. Yeah.
And it lets you see the relationships. And that's, what's you have to know when you get into FM programming. You have to know what those relationships are, or else you're chasing your tail.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot lighter than a DX1. I can vouch for that. Drew.
Output, right?
Drew, did you have any thoughts on this?
I have not tried it. So I would look forward to giving it a whirl and seeing what I think. I am not an FM expert. I've always admired Manny's capabilities when it comes to FM. So I've always steered away when there's somebody who can do it much better than I can. And but I'll certainly be looking to give it a whirl. But I would like to mention that there's another instrument called the Instrument Designer 700, which is a version of the Buchla 700.
The ID 700.
It's done by a guy named John Schatz, I think is how you pronounce his name. And it's FM taken to an extreme. I mean, he really tried to mimic the FM that Buchla did in the 700, which he only made about 8 or 10 of. So just as a shout out to people out there, if they're looking for something to really go to town with, check out Instrument Designer.
Frantically looking for my copy so I can show it to people.
Well, Ben, did you have a go with this at all?
Yeah, I downloaded it. I only got the demo, which is like really infuriating because just as you're getting into it, it just like cuts out completely. And but if you reload it up, you can start. I don't know how long they give you, about a minute or something, but it's like it starts again if you reload it up, and it's good. The programming interface is great, and when you said it reminded you slightly of the Arturia DX7, I wondered if it was similar in any way to the Essence FM, because I know that that's all colour based. Well, from what I can see, does it bear any resemblance to that at all? No,
not really. No.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
But what I will say is that whilst it doesn't look like any of the screens that you get on the Essence FM, it bears the same kind of DNA in terms of it presenting FM in a very visual manner, where you can see the effect of things on other things, and you can see what's going on and learn to understand it a little bit more. So it has, it has those kind of things going on.
I did find it easy to program. Like using like subtractive synthesis mainly. It made sense to me, probably more than other interfaces I've used, trying to do the FM thing before. It's kind of logical. The only bit that I don't fully understand is the algorithms. I don't think I'll ever get my head around that. The Sweetwater demo that came out recently, that explained it quite well, but like obviously like a goldfish, 30 seconds later I forgot. But
I'm sorry, what?
But yeah, for FM it's great. I don't know if I would buy it personally, but for percussive sounds, the programming system is great for FM, and it does sound good. I've got other FM stuff, so not for me, but it's good value. Yeah, definitely.
Just a couple things. First of all, there was something that shot by in chat. I can't see who said it, but we'll give credit where it's due. My comment, somebody followed up with, "What happens if I do this? Ding dong, honey, get the door."
Oh, very fun.
Yeah, exactly. and this, by the way, this is what ID 700 looks like.
There you go.
If I can get that on there. It's actually a beautiful system, and if you've ever seen, this is actually a public service. This is a charitable service. Don Buchla was not big on designing instruments that were easy to use. His attitude was, you bring your functionality across, and if people have trouble with it, that's not your problem. And the 700 was an astoundingly weird little machine, just bizarre. Yeah. So now you can get the sounds without bending your brain out of shape. Okay, I'm done.
Lovely. Well, on that note, just to remind you, it's BLEASS.com, pronounced Bliss, I am told. Omega is their synth. It's $59. They actually do a package, I think, where you get that and a whole bunch of other things for about $59 at the moment. It's reduced on sale. So, and it's $10 on iOS. So even better. I would just like to address something that's going on in the chat room. We have somebody there who is demanding that we talk about Alan Wilder and Vince Clarke. We'd love to talk about Alan Wilder and Vince Clarke. We'd love to talk to them in person one day. You never know. But that's not the topic for the show. So there's no need to keep going on about it.
Yeah, the first five times were fine, buddy. We got you. We
love them. We love them. We respect them. We'll try and get them on our show, but not tonight, because tonight is reserved for the one and only Drew Schlesinger. And I really want to get into Drew's story now and kind of dedicate the rest of the show to him. So. Woohoo! Before we get to talking to Drew about where it all started and how he got into the sound design and composing worlds, I just want to show you this list. So this is a list that Drew sent me of every piece of musical technology equipment, synthesizers and effects units and expansion cards that he has worked on. I'm just going to slowly scroll through this because this is really a who's who of some of the greatest electronic instruments of the last 30 odd years. I mean, look at the Rolands there, the JD800s, the 990s, the JP8000s, the JV80s, 1080s, 2080s, the XVs, all of those expansion boards. Look at all that Kurzweil stuff, Sasquatch. A lot of the sounds you're playing on your lovely Kurzweil are down to this gentleman.
God,
look at all the
slacker.
stuff. I know. I mean, it's just terrible. All of those EMU units that we were talking about. I think we were talking about it on Kent's little chat on Tuesday. All of those 1U rack mounts, the Orbits, the Planet Earths, the Planet Fats, the MoFats, all of that stuff. My personal favorite, and we had a little chat off show, and I'll share that information with you just a little later. But look at all that Korg stuff. M3R, Wave Station, O1W, or the M10, and unless you read it upside down like the head of Korg did, apparently. The Z1 or the Z1 for our American friends. Look at all that Alesis stuff. I mean, loads of Alesis stuff. Eventide, H3000, 3500. I mean, I could go on, and this list, I tell you, it does. It's amazing. All of that in Sonic, the Casio CZ1s, the VZs, the Kawai K1s, K4s, K5000s. All the Sound Toys software, Lexicon material there as well, GForce. Now, I've got to say that I've been playing with the Mk.II M-Tron this last week. It's brilliant. And OBE as well is just a brilliant thing. And I love your patches on those. Really do. Clark Technic, General Music, C2 Audio, Sear Systems, Zoom, PV, Dave Smith, even the Sega Dreamcast. Oh, whatever happened to that?
The techniques, God bless you. The WSA.
There you go. So, and Waldorf, and bringing up the rear, Oberheim, Novation, Spectrasonics, and Nord. I mean, that's a resume to be proud of. Drew Schlesinger, tell us, in not so great detail, how you got to the point where you were designing.
Get going.
Where did it all start for you? Because you were studying music at an educational level as well, weren't you? So how did it all really start for you to get into this?
Actually, I was studying photography and film.
Oh, wow.
I was enamored with synths since 74. I got my first synth, a Micro Moog, when I was at college. I'm going to try to do this really quick. Sure. Graduated college. While I was at college, I went to the Boston School of Electronic Music for a summer semester, studied with Jim Mitchmerheisen, who ran a BSEM, which was an incredible experience. I mean, it was like a dream come true. I graduated college, went to New York, was a traveling salesman by day and building out a studio with a bunch of synths at night, writing pop songs and synth pop stuff. And then along came programmable synths, the Casio and the DX7, and that changed it. I immediately gravitated towards the CZ101, started creating patches. I first printed them on paper, sold them to Manny's Music on 48th Street and Sam Ash across the street. They started selling them. Then they had somebody came out with 64 voice RAM cartridges. I made 3 of those. Started selling those, started a mail order business, got them reviewed, and then I met a guy named Jerry Kowarski, who was the head of product development at
Jerry,
who went on to work at Ensoniq and Korg for years. I mean, great guy, incredible player.
Wonderful fellow. Wonderful.
Really just a legend in the industry. And he really liked what I was doing, and he said, I'd like you to or would you like to show your 3 sound cartridges at the Summer NAMM show in Chicago?
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I'm at the Casio booth with a sign with my logo and showing the sound cartridges. And from there, I just started making contacts, started going to the NAMM show. I was approached to write a book called The Insider's Guide to the Casio CZ series for Alpha Publishing. Did that. All of a sudden, I had some credibility. I still was going to the NAMM shows. Then I met Jack Hotop at Korg, who...
Another wonderful guy.
One of the best synthesizer programmers on the planet ever, sound designers. I mean, he's just incredible, an inspiration. And he gave me a gig doing some sounds for the M3R ethnic card. And then it just was like, I had some credibility. kept going to the NAMM shows, asking the companies, who runs your sound design department? I've done this, I've done that. And I just started getting work. I was a freelancer. Mm-hmm. And between 1986 and 2001, pretty much I just had machines coming in and out of my house. The UPS guy was not my friend, especially when like a Kurzweil K2600 was showing up and he's like sweating, trying to get it to my door. He says, I don't know, dude, you got to stop this stuff. And what I do want to make clear is that I was just one of the contributors to all those instruments. I was hired as a contractor, and they would say, we would like you to make 50 sounds, 100 sounds. Generally, it was no less than 25 to 50. And my stock and trade was really coming up with non-emulative sounds. I tried to make sounds that were unique, new timbres, that were musically useful, inspirational. So when somebody played it, it was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe, I could hear that in a piece of my music. And there were other people who did the emulative stuff much better than I. Mm-hmm. And I always come from a synthesis background, so I consider myself a synthesist, quote unquote synthesist. Yeah. So just, did good work, was reliable, delivered on time, delivered quality work, just like in any gig. Yeah. If you do good work, your name gets around, and it was a lot of hustle.
Yeah, sounds it.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
what I want to know.
Backstory.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to know. I ask this of any sound designer that I speak to is, where do you start? So you've got an instrument that's just been dumped on your desk, and maybe this is an instrument that might even be still in prototype stage. Maybe it hasn't got anything inside of it, and you're expected to come up with sounds. Do you have a consistent starting point that you say, right, I'm going to do this, this, and this, because that will always get me something that's interesting, and then I'll build from there? What is the seed that plants the sound in your head?
It's really breaking the device down into its component parts. What's the ROM? If it's a ROM base, what's the ROM samples? What kind of modulation or morphing capabilities do I have to change those sounds? What do the filters sound like? And EMU came out with the Morpheus, those Z-plane filters, and it was like, this is incredible. I mean, it's just unlike anything else I had heard. But it's really, I always sort of break it down into its base component parts, and then start figuring out what are the capabilities, and try to understand the structure of the instrument. What's the modulation capabilities? And then from there, it's just saying, well, what do I think is going to sound good? And, sort of like cooking, you come up with a recipe and you add different spices and you try to come up with something new. I think that the important thing is always try to come up with some unique sounds that were going to be emblematic of what that instrument could do. That was really something I would try to do, was say, here's where this machine can go. This is what it's capable of doing. But never, not often going out into abstract world. Sometimes you would, but most of the companies, they're selling instruments. They want somebody to come in the store, put their hands on it and be inspired. Yeah. So you had to work within sort of that box and make it useful, make it musical, make it inspirational.
Yeah. Do you ever start from a place where you think, okay, so I need to maybe deliver 10 lead sounds and 10 bass sounds and, some pads? Or is it just churning out stuff that inspires and that you happen across, a series of happy accidents maybe? Or do you have a remit? Or even maybe do the manufacturers say, look, we want these kinds of sounds, and then you have to kind of build to order?
Actually, no. I was always given free rein. They said, do what you do. And I would always try to make a smattering of a bunch of different types of sounds. I would have a bass sound. I'd lead sounds, pad sounds, something ambient. So I tried to make it so that as you moved from one sound to the next, you were surprised and you heard a different timbral quality. So it was rare that I would be told, we need a bunch of bass sounds or we need a bunch of lead sounds. After a while, again, my stock and trade as I call it, was really coming up with mostly unique sounds, something different. And they liked them. The important thing was that they liked them enough that they put them in the machine. Yeah. So, because they were paying me for each of the sounds that I developed, regardless of whether it was good or not. And usually they liked them. Every once in a while they come back, said, could you tweak this a little, take a little reverb off, a little too much chorus, a little too much delay. And but generally, no, it was do what you do.
Cool. Very good. Now, one of the instruments that you've worked on is one of my all-time favorite instruments. I know it's one of Mike's too. It's the Korg Prophecy. Woohoo! And I've seen images of you and the entire team developing the factory sounds for that and a number of other machines, the Z1 as well. So I'm assuming you went out to Japan and worked with those guys and spent some time with the engineers and the developers. And how does creating a set of factory presets differ from, say, somebody sending you a Kurzweil via the UPS guy, where you're maybe just developing an expansion bank, say, for example? What's the main difference between factory presets and add-on sounds?
Well, yeah, that was an incredible experience. First off, it was the first time I got to go to Japan, worked with some incredible people. Peter Schwartz, who people may or may not know, he's worked with David Bowie. He's just an incredible musician and composer, player, synthesist. Phil McDonald, who worked at Korg. And we got there, we all came with some sounds, and the goal really was hammering out new sounds and deciding what actually, that was an example where we were trying to go for certain numbers of types of sounds, certain number of bass sounds, certain number of lead sounds, certain number of sounds that would show off the different types of physical modeling. And we would go off and we would just have our headphones on, we'd be programming, and we'd come back and we'd pool the sounds and we'd keep pooling the sounds. And after a while, the better sounds, we would say, okay, well, this looks like, first bank material. And really what you were looking for in most synths were, what's the first bank? What's the A bank? And more so, what's 00 or A00 or whatever the first patch is, the pole position. I am happy and proud to say that was one synth where my patch got voted to be in the pole position, was called Prophetic Steps. And that was really rewarding. I mean, people were tough critics. And it wasn't like, you weren't going to get away with anything. So it was really a team effort. And really, there was a product manager from Korg who had an idea of what she wanted the instrument to sound like and how she wanted it presented. But it was so far ahead of its time. I mean, it was... It did not sell well, but it was incredibly powerful. And they just released, it just showed up a few months ago, the VST version, which is even more amazing because, number one, it's polyphonic. Number two, it's got an incredible interface. It's really easy to use. Sounds phenomenal.
Waiting for it on iOS.
Excuse me?
Waiting for it on iOS.
I don't know. I didn't have anything.
They'll do it. They'll do it. Korg. There is no Korg legacy instrument that has not ended up on iOS in one form or another. So it'll come. It may be years. We waited a long time for the iMonopoly, but it'll come. But yeah, they're amazing instruments. And Drew, I had no idea you did Prophetic Steps. That's awesome.
Thank you. That whole experience was probably the most rewarding. I mean, going to Japan, and they were out in like an area of Tokyo that was like Queens. So it was like really being in country, and it was really, really amazing experience. And an amazing instrument and a great team. Everybody says great team, great, but it was really a killer team. The designers were brilliant, and it was really collaborative. And then the follow-on to that was the Z1, which was the second one that I went to Japan for with Korg. And that also had an incredible team. That had John Lemko, plugin guru, Skippy, John Bowen, who originally worked for Sequential and has Solaris. Jerry Kowarski was there. So similar type of thing, you know, bring your best game, bring your AA game.
I mean, if I've seen some of the photos that you posted, and if anybody hasn't already done this, Drew has an account on Instagram where he's regularly posting not only pictures of his own exploits, such as the trips to Japan with Korg, but also, you know, classic synthesizer pictures. It's a real nice little kind of, you know, almost a daily picture of something cool and synthesizer related. So if you haven't already, go and search for Drew Schlesinger on Instagram. We'll try and get the link up before we go. One more question from me, because I know that there's some questions in the comments. I know that Manny and Mike have probably got some stuff as well. I hope so, because I told them to. But I wanted to ask, kind of to come back to that point you made about the first sound on, you know, the first sound in the preset bank on the synthesizer and the importance of that. I worked on the Alesis Fusion, and the one thing we kept telling these guys was that they got their whole patch layout completely wrong, because the first sound was just a piano, and then the second sound was another piano, and then the third one was, guess what, another piano. Yeah, it was terrible, because you know, when you walk into well, do you remember the time when we used to have music stores you could walk into? When you used to walk into a music store, into the synthesizer section, you'd have all of the latest and greatest set up, you know, there with either headphones or plugged into speakers. And you just went up to it and just started playing. And you needed those first few sounds to be the sounds that made you go, oh my God, I've got to part with cash to have this in my life. And one of the things with the Fusion was that it was just, oh, there's a piano. Lovely. And you had to really go and look for those, you know, the good sounds that it was capable of doing. So the importance of those, that first batch of sounds, maybe the first bank of sounds, is hugely important in terms of the way that it sells the instrument to the public. So, you know, how much effort is put into developing maybe the first sort of 10 sounds in that first bank?
I think they decide first that they, you know, what they want to show. How do they want to present the instrument? If it's really a rompler that's going to be doing, you know, strings and piano and brass, and then you want to have a smattering of all those realistic sounds. Maybe the first sound should be a piano, but the second sound maybe is, you know, some sort of distorted guitar, and the third sound is, you know, a slap bass. Usually you want to have a bunch of different sounds, so that when somebody plays, if you get through the first bank and they haven't walked away, they're going to go, oh, okay, that's cool. So in my mind, you know, companies really look for sounds that people are going to find inspiring to play. What you find these days is that with so many sounds, they will bank them and put them into categories. But that really didn't exist back in those days, really. You know, you didn't have a categorization. Here's my pianos. Here's my synth leads. You know, so you weren't doing all that list-based searching. So the first bank of sounds really should be, or would be, looked at as like, this needs to really show off what this thing is capable of doing and how good it can sound. Because you never know what somebody's use case is going to be. One guy may be doing a gig, you know, playing weddings. Another guy may be composing and looking for something new and something unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for answering my questions. Ben, I know we've had a few people throw some questions into the chat.
Yeah, we've had a couple of things thrown into the chat. Eric wanted to know what Drew's experience has been like with the 700. He's seen lots of pictures on your Instagram.
Sadly, it was phenomenal and short-lived. I saw Don demonstrated in a little motel room at NAMM. I said, I got to order one of these. I got it. I worked with it. It was just, as Mike said,
opaque.
Don's design was like, well, it's really easy to use as long as you know how to understand how to use it. So the experience was phenomenal, but then life changed. House, getting married, kids. I wasn't using it. I was doing all the sound design, and I'm like, it's sitting here unused. I can get a good amount of money for it, and I sadly sold it. And that rates as one of those "what was I thinking" moments. Looking back now is like, who knew?
We've all been there. We've all been there, I'm sure.
Yeah. There's a bunch. There's a bunch of them. That one probably rates as number one. It was an amazing instrument. I mean, it was just there was nothing like it. Probably to this day, even.
There was quite deliberately there was nothing like it. I mean, that's Don in a nutshell, basically. Anyway.
Yeah. Hey, but look on the bright side. Now you've got your iOS version, and you don't have to.
And you can actually program it, which is kind of nice.
The iOS version, it's great. I recommend it, especially for there's one coming out, or it may be actually out for the Mac as well as a standalone. But the iOS one is really, it's just, the only thing it doesn't have is analog filters, but the quality of what Jon's done there, I mean, he's really captured the essence of the instrument. So people can really get a sense of what Don did. And it's also still pretty quirky, wave shaping, FM, amplitude modulation, configurations, algorithms, and tons of envelopes for everything. 15 envelopes, I think, with any number of points and all sorts of modulation. It's nuts. You could spend a long time really learning it.
Ben.
Well, I was going to talk about myself for a bit, but you're the guest. But my point being is when I use a lot of presets. I do. I'm a preset tweaker. That's what I describe myself as. Not a programmer, a preset tweaker. And that made me realise, looking at the list on your resume of stuff you programmed, that your presets have probably made it into my music on several occasions. And Wagyu jokingly said while we were showing that impressive list that he would like you to name the favorite patch that you created for every one of those lovely bits of gear. Now, I'm not going to try and get you to do that.
Well, hang on, Wagyu's paid good money for that question. I think we.
Yeah, well, you can attempt it if you like, but I wonder if like a couple, like your showpiece sounds that, like, if you had to show somebody your three best sounds, do you know what they would be?
I know the one, and that is Prophetic Steps.
Yes.
Prophecy. I know this sounds crazy, but there were thousands of sounds, and it was so long ago. I don't remember. There are two effect presets, though, that I can wave my flag, and that is for the H3000, the Eventide. I created the initial Crystal Echoes patch, which turned into what we now know as Shimmer.
Wow!
I just collapsed. My heart just stopped.
So that was one, and the other one was Black Hole, the Black Hole reverb for the DSP.
Oh wow!
And I was about to get back up into my chair, and I'm back on the floor again.
Wow!
I say that with all humility. The Black Hole was done 3:00 in the morning. With something called a SIG editor. It was a text editor. It was as close as I ever got to computer programming. And those two probably have, Black Hole became its own product. I mean, they took it and
it's it's the iOS version that is based on your original code.
All based on the
glorious
the original modules. Yeah.
Glorious.
Wow. So those are the three. The other ones, there were so many. I sadly can't remember, and I don't have lists. I can tell you one. In the Wavestation SR, there's a sound called Marscape. And the reason why it stands out is I once got to go to Hans Zimmer's studio when I was doing some work with Yamaha, with Bleass. I think it was the AN1X or the EX7. And one of the composers had a rack of gear, and he had the Wavestation SR, and it was turned to Marscape. And I said, oh, I did that patch. He says, oh, I use that patch all the time. I said, yeah, there's a lot of great patches in that machine. He says, no, that's the only patch I use in that machine.
So. That's very Hans. He had at the time when I met him, he had a rack of 31 Roland S760 samplers, each with a particular sound he liked preloaded. His attitude was he didn't want to screw around with hard disks. He just, if he had a sound he liked, he bought another sampler.
So he'd have it at his disposal. I don't want to scroll. Yeah, his studio was, an amusement park of sonic.
Yeah, he broke me of gas. I literally, I spent an hour in that studio chatting with him, and when I came out, I didn't have gas anymore because what was the point?
Yeah. Can I take a minute to segue this into something that I'd like to do, because you touched on the effects. Because one of the things that always impressed me, Drew, is how you not just did such great sound design from synths, but how you got into doing all those effects. Because that's an area that I've never delved into, and I've always been very impressed in your work in that. And I'm curious, because I know it basically started with the KDFX and the 2500, I think, for Kurzweil. But tell me more about how you approach that, how it's similar or how it's different from how you approach your synthesizer programming.
Actually, doing effects and especially reverbs, that's generally more of a focused effort. Mm-hmm. I will actually say, I want to make a sound. I want to make a garage. I want to make something that sounds like a small wooden studio. I want something that's huge, and really understanding how algorithmic reverbs work. I mean, I learned over the years, got down into the low level, the delays, the diffusers, the all pass filters. Mm-hmm. KDFX actually was one that I got really down in the guts, and we're actually creating the things that, when you call up the algorithm and it says room or hall or plate, that was one where I did some of that work. Mm-hmm. But with Lexicon and TC, it was really a function of what is this thing capable of? As I said earlier, you break it down into its component parts. Do you have early reflections that are separate? What are the delays like? What's the shaping of the rooms? What are the original algorithms work or sound like? And a lot of times it's actually not trying to make it sound good. It's trying to get rid of the bad. How do you get rid of the ringing? How do you get a small space that sounds natural? And especially when you're using it with synthesizers or romplers, which every time you hit it, you're playing the same sample back exactly the same way. So the sound design for reverbs, I found the trick was I'd get a sample of a trumpet, a snare drum, a guitar, things that were completely dry, no vibrato, and keep hitting it over and over. It was headphone hell. That's where you really try to get away from how do I make the sound really good and get rid of the bad artifacts? How do I make it sound real? Or for Black Hole or something like that, how do I make it sound, really good? But you also have to figure out, use a bunch of different types of input devices so that it's going to work with as many items as you can. And of course, if you name it drum room, obviously somebody's going to say, oh, that's for percussion. So a lot of times you would put an instrument name in, guitar, small guitar verb or something like that. So just it's a whole different creative approach, but similar at the same time.
That's interesting, because what little dabbling that I did in that type of stuff, the wall I hit was, like you said, how to make them not sound bad. Whether it's the ring, and it's like for whatever reason I could not ever get that in my endeavors of it, and it was just like I just can't get this to sound the way I want, which I thought was ironic because I spent a lot of time making FM not sound bad, but I could never get it with effects. I just never could get that together. So kudos. I've always been very impressed with what you did in that area.
Thanks. And actually it's visualization and sonics. I call it sort of the visual art of sound design, especially when it comes to reverb and effects processing. When you're doing reverbs, you're really trying to think, does this sound like this space? Does this sound like the space I'm naming it? You know? And if you come up with a name, of course, it tends to give people, oh, that's what it is, but it should ring true, right? If I do something with it, does it sound like what I've just called it? Does it sound like a hall? Does it sound like a place? Does it sound like I'm in a club, an empty club? It's great. It's fun.
Another quick one from me, inspired by what you just said there. Patch names. With regard, synthesizer patch names. I mean, some of the, like prophetic steps, which I just fired up the prophecy, so I might give people a blast of that because it is a great sound. You get the idea that the stepping nature of the patch, but where do you get those patch names from? Do you come up with the patch names, or do you all come up with patches and then sit around and decide this is going to be called that or that could be called that? How does that work?
No, actually that's a big part of it, coming up with the names. I would make up words, just think, it's like, how do they come up with names for drugs? What does Prozac mean? What does Cialis mean? I mean, it's just like, okay, these are just words. So for non-realistic sounds, you just try to come up with something creative that's interesting. If it's realistic, you can put an adjective in front of guitar, spaced guitar. I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but yeah, coming up with the names of something that gives somebody an idea or is emulative of what it's supposed to be. That's part of the art, I guess, in science. It's just coming up with crazy names, and sometimes on the Wave Station Ski Jam.
Did you create that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. That was you don't want people to bring the knives out.
He's the master of the Wave Station, and also he worked on the Wave State, which is one of the instruments that I would very much like to try.
Yeah.
I have one here.
Yeah, it's cool machines.
It looks really deep. Looks like you could get lost there.
Yeah. I mean, just on that patch name thing, I love the inventiveness that you get. I mean, also the wordplay that people, you created. A friend of mine used to create samples, and instead of calling it he'd sample a Juno, for example, and instead of calling it a Juno something or other because he didn't want to use the name because there's probably a trademark thing going on there, he would call it D''UNO, Duno. Because it was just a little play on words and clever little things, but you knew exactly what you were going to get, and you weren't infringing anyone's copyright. But I love being able to flick through a synth and already start to hear the sound before I've heard it, because the name inspires it that way.
Yeah, and you try to do that. I mean, that's especially the example you just gave, where it's, you're not going to say Juno strings, but clever people, and there's lots of them, good sound designers will come up with good names that fit the sound or give you some indication of what you're going to get when you play that note.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, were there any other questions in the
chat? There were.
Just let me get rid of some of the ones that I've already done. Ben, a different Ben, not me, asked Drew if you could pick a couple of patches that are notable to you or particular favourites across your career. What synths were they for, and why would you single them out? Well, you have mentioned some of those already, but
Yeah, I can't. Gosh, I really wish I could. And people have emailed me and asked me the same thing a lot of times. And I'd have to actually have the hardware and sit in front of it again and say, oh, that's mine. Oh, that one was mine too. But I don't, it's not like I kept a list, which is probably stupid on my part. I should have kept a list of all the ones that I did for each of the instruments. But back then, who knew?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's next? Emu's left, Kurzweil's coming, Korg is coming after that.
Yeah.
Got 50 sounds to do, Yeah.
Did you ever like program a synth that you were given? It kind of ties in with Synth Addict's question here. Did you ever get a synth and you've done the sounds for it that you were supposed to do, but like fell in love with that synth and gone out and bought one afterwards? Have you ever done anything like that?
Oh my God. Back then, it was a lot of the times I would say, you know what? You don't have to pay me. I'm just going to keep this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a lot. A lot of devices I kept or traded the work for the device. One point I had K2000, a DSP 4000, PCM 81, JV 1080, Wavestation SR. There were a lot of instruments that I fell in love with and kept. But I also found from doing all this work, and there's something that I call instrumental intimacy. If you think about somebody who plays an acoustic instrument and maybe they have their favorite guitar, after a while they become intimate with that instrument and know what it's going to do. Like I'm sure Itzhak Perlman has knows his violin, or Yo-Yo Ma knows his cello. And I have found, this is just a personal thing, that I like to find an instrument that I feel that I can spend a lot of time with and get really intimate with. And there haven't been that many that I have over my career. The ones now, Spectrasonics Omnisphere, I think is one of the best synths I've ever used. I could live with that just by itself. But the Wavestation, the Prophecy, Madrona Labs Alto, which is not well known, is an absolutely incredible synthesizer. It's sort of West Coast and it's very unassuming, but once you start getting your handle around it, I mean, it can just make so many different sounds and really strange sounds, and unique sounds. So over the years, at this point, I really don't have any hardware except the Synthy behind me, a small Surge, and everything else is in the computer.
With your interest in the Buchla stuff, what do you think of these tip-top re-releases that's come out?
That's incredible. That's drool-worthy. Not Drew-worthy, drool-worthy. I mean, they're really doing something really cool there with bringing back the true 200 series modules. And I think it looks like they're banana jacks. And they're using the standard Buchla, the mini jacks for the audio and banana for.
They're actually 3.5 millimeters. You just use the little rings to make it have that aesthetic.
Is it okay? I couldn't tell.
Oh, that's cheating.
Well, the thing
it's going in the Euro rack. Come on, Mike.
Phooey.
What I love about the Surge is the fact that it's all banana jacks, and I never have to think about a multiple. I can send one thing into a million different places. So for me, that's the ultimate patching system, which is why I've been using a Surge for 30 some years. It's just a small two-panel system, but I really, the thing that frustrates me about Euro is I want to send this one signal into like 7 different places, and you can't stack those jacks that high.
Well, yeah, they do make stackable ones, but when you get out beyond 4, it gets a little bit iffy.
Yeah, it gets a little rickety.
And when you get a chance, Drew, I have a question, but I'll wait
sure.
for you to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It has to do. You talk about the Surge, and I'm just wondering: are you familiar with a Surge system called Fist of God?
Yes, of course. Kevin Berhini.
No. Kevin had part of Fist of God. The real Fist of God was a 24-panel system.
Yeah. Who was the guy?
John Duvall.
John Duvall, yes.
Very dear friend of mine. He had to sell it all. His had some family financial issues, and he actually parted it out. And the 3 or 4 people who bought them, they all got like 8-panel systems. But he had a 24-panel Surge in his house. And what an amazing machine! Total overkill, worth it.
I mean, it's like a nuclear reactor of sonic.
Yeah, but John's incredible. He has very little money, very little resources. He's back to playing mostly electronic guitar now. But he's still out there and he's still kicking. And I've actually got some of the last sounds he made with that Surge. He gave me like 3 or 4 hours of sample material to work with. So,
he was a Surge. He was like kind of the king.
He was, and he misses it terribly. I'd love to get him back into it again, but I can't afford to buy him 8 panels.
No, and funny enough, I mean, the RS Surge stuff, the stuff that's coming out, it's similar. I actually was in LA not too recently and got to play with some of the Surge stuff that's in Eurorack. And it sounds different than the stuff that Rex Probe makes, which is a Surge.
Yeah, the Surge's original stuff and Rex's stuff, there's just something about it.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with the power supply, the fact that he's using, larger discrete components. It's not surface mount. It's through-hole technology.
Exactly. And the thing about Surges that everybody, what's the big deal? And the thing about Surges is they're built like scientific instruments. When you set a Surge oscillator in tune, by God, it stays there.
Yeah.
And the whole creation of sound on them is based on the fact that they don't drift.
And you can intermodulate. There's no distinction between CV and audio triggers. I mean, you could shove one thing into everything else. Lots of feedback paths. I mean, my little system's really based around randomization. So I will set up a patch. Sometimes I'll work on a patch for 2-3 weeks, and then I'll let it sit for a month or 2 months, and I'll just have it burbling in the background because it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. I mean, personally, I've never done anything musical with them. It's always been noise based.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah, for me, it's fun. It's like, wow, that's a really cool sound. Sometimes I get the discipline to actually sample it, and I have some stuff in the can for over the last 10 years. I'm actually going to probably put it out as an experimental album and maybe in the next year or so.
Which brings me nicely to my next question, because I want to talk to you, Drew, about your musical releases, because you're not just making sounds, you're using sounds and creating output. You released an album a few years ago with David Torn, the Summer Sound 79. It was a recording.
Summer Synthesis 1978.
Yes. I was almost there. I was
ballpark. It's fine.
I was ballpark. But you've just put out something new, which was these recordings we talked about at the top of the show, which were just radar echoes. So you released kind of two cassettes, and this is kind of like a compilation best of culled from both of these. Would I be right in saying?
They're actually the first songs I ever wrote and I sang, which scared my wife. And she was like, "Are you sure you want to put this out?" But I did do a test before I put it out and played it for some people, and they said, "No, it's cool." So these were recorded in my little studio in the corner of New York City, 58th Street in New York City. They were actually Mk.II is the first song I ever wrote, ever sang. David Torn plays this crazy guitar solo on it. and I pulled 8 songs that I thought sounded the best and were a good smattering of different types, and had it remastered. And it's all analog synthesis. It's all played by hand. There were no sequencers, there were no computers. Obviously, MIDI didn't exist. So, and it was recorded on a 4-track and a 2-track. So I'd record 4 tracks, I'd mix it down to stereo, play along, print all the effects as I was recording it, throw the 2-track back on the 4-track, add a couple more parts, mix it down, done. So I decided, what the heck, I have it in the can. It's 40 years, might as well just throw it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And
there's a question. Sorry, there's a question from the chat about this, saying that it's come from 4-track, and knowing how meticulous you are over sounds and that. How did you find working with 40-year-old tape?
Well, it was 10 years ago that I transferred the tapes into the computer. I finally found somebody who had a decent 4-track machine local to me, because you buy a tape deck and the chances of it actually working are low, and even then it still needed to be refurbished. And I had these tapes sitting in my my basement for 30 years, and I just spent a month going through the tapes. Some of them were not good, some of them lasted. I guess the cold down in the basement, I couldn't bake them, and I just transferred them. So a bunch of them were the master mixes, the 2-track mixes, and I do have some where I have the actual original tracks, then the mixed down tracks, and the additional 2 tracks as well. So I didn't go back to remixing them. I took the stereo masters, tried to find the best version that I could, that sounded right, and didn't have dropout, etc., and then remastered it from that. So it's really true to what it was back then, and didn't really change the sound very much at all. Wanted to keep it kind of true to what it was at the time.
Yeah, great.
The other album that let me just bring this up on the screen is I've got the wrong one there. Summer Synthesis 78, which I've now got the name correct on, which is something you did with David Torn, and he was playing the ARP Avatar, wasn't he? A lot on this as well. That's a really interesting sound, and it was brought to my attention by Alex Ball when he was doing his ARP documentary, and he said, "Hey, Rob, you got to listen to this." And you very kindly signed the copy that I bought from you, so I have that. That's kind of a little treasured possession. But no, it's a great album. I mean, you've done. I mean, David appears also on this new release. But tell us a little bit about your work with David, because he's a pretty influential guy.
Right. So it's really interesting. This also sat in the basement for 40 years. And I never thought it was that good. We never went to try and record an album. I had my little studio. I heard David had bought an ARP Avatar. He played in a band called the Zobo Fun Band, which was this really great band up in Ithaca. And we were kind of friends. And I said, look, I've got this studio. Why don't you bring over your Avatar? And I can show you how it works. We can start fooling around. And I had been making sort of these backing tracks that weren't finished songs. And we just started recording. And some of the stuff he did was just phenomenal, blew my mind. He had two foot pedals, and we would tune them to different intervals. So as he was playing, he would play a note, and he was doing like polyphonic guitar work by changing, probably a third to a minor to a major, and his ability to play the Avatar was notoriously difficult to play. I mean, it tracked like crap.
Yeah.
But his technique was such that he really could make the thing work. And so everything you hear there is most of it's just like first takes of him playing, either on a track that I had, a backing track that I had created, and then we recorded some of his tracks that he composed, And he would just sit there and he would just lay it down and he'd say, okay, next. We'd find a new sound. And we weren't, like I said, we weren't trying to make an album. We were just recording, and we never did anything. It never pressed it, never made any cassettes or anything. It just sat. And then, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I called him up and I said, you know what? Can you take a listen to these and let me know if they're any good? And he said, yeah, you should put it out. Absolutely. And we had a bunch more, and we culled out the best of what we had. There's probably another 10 songs that we did, but these were the best. And David was really influential. And at that point, he wasn't David Torn. I mean, and I was happy for him to say that, yeah, this is good enough to put out, because he had a reputation. And the last thing I wanted him to do was to have people say, what's this?
Yeah.
So it's something I'm really proud of. I have to admit, it was really early, and we were doing all sorts of crazy stuff with the Oberheim expander module that had all the patch points coming out, and the Micro Moog and the ARP Avatar, and combining them all. And I was doing most of the sound design, and David was playing, and I was doing a lot of processing of his regular guitar through stuff. So, I mean, David is he's just brilliant.
Yeah. Well, you made a great album together. And if anybody wants to buy any of those releases, you just head over to drewschlesinger.bandcamp.com, and you'll find both those releases there. And very generously, they are name your price. So, you know, pay what you think it's worth, but just pay. That's all I would say. And, you know,
it does appreciate it, of course.
Yeah, it does allow you to do zero, but no, don't. At least, you know, pay some money and get this stuff.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's really good. I mean, there's some great gear on there, and the music is fantastic. And yeah, it's well worth whatever you donate there. There was a question that I just saw here that I just want to throw to you, because I am conscious of the time, and we have kind of slightly overrun. But Sasquatch, and I think the rest of us,
said the synthy.
We want to hear the synthy. So would you oblige us?
Yes, I actually have a patch sitting here. So what?
As one does.
As one does.
It's so you can't see it, but I have this little tiny Euro rack which has a bunch of random modules, and it's just triggering. It was. There you go. So it's just doing its thing.
That filter's crazy, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
When resonance goes low.
You know, change the joystick and
oh, that's nice.
I think it just insulted R2D2's mother.
It's like R2D2 noises, but that's the kind of stuff that I do. I set it up and I'll just let it go, and do the same thing with the Surge. It's just a lot of fun.
So I assume you've got the front case for that, and you literally take it with you wherever you
actually go? It very rarely leaves my house. We happened to be in Florida, and we took the auto train, which was a trip, and I,
so to speak.
I had my car, so I would take it. But other than that, it's never been out of the house. I don't let it leave.
No.
And actually, this is a Cornwall, so that I waited 13 years to get. I had a synthy for since '79, and actually, the one that's on one of Mark Vale's book was another one I had. Mm-hmm. And then about 5 years ago, my number came up. Robin Wood still builds them out in Cornwall. Mm-hmm. And I sold my old one and got a new one, and it's like came out of a time machine.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. I mean, the design of this thing is just it never ceases to amaze me. You can always something new comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful piece of gear. Ben, any more questions in the chat?
Yeah, just let me get my head around this one. When you're programming patches, Drew, Grace wants to know, is it more important for a patch to sell a product or to take the user further into the understanding of how to get the most out of a device?
Actually, that's a great question, and I think the answer to it is both. You got to remember, I mean, these companies who Korg and Kurzweil and Alesis, they're building products that they want to sell. And for them to sell, they need to be inspirational. Somebody needs to sit down and play it, say, wow, I could see myself making music with that sound, or this thing has, the kind of sounds that I'm looking for. So it's really a balance of, again, creating sounds that some people will find useful for standard things, a wedding gig, whatever, and then other sounds. But I mean, you're not going to go to a wave station and think you're going to take that to a wedding gig, but go to it. Like the M-1, for example, was probably one of the best examples of a hybrid of an instrument that did great emulation, great evocative sounds, really ticked all the boxes, and rightly so. It was one of the best-selling synths ever. So I always look to try to make sounds that were playable, musically useful, and evocative. I guess those were the three things that were on my to-do list. Somebody shouldn't go, huh? Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Gotta say, thank you.
I know.
Thank you, Manny. It's incredibly generous.
Wow.
And yeah, I think we all do. I think we all want to be Drew when we grow. Do we grow up, or do we just wear bigger trousers?
I subscribe to the Peter Pan theory. You can make me grow old. You can't make me grow up.
Yep. And Dr. Seuss once said, adults are obsolete children, and I say to hell with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my favorite people, Dr. Seuss. Great inspiration.
Share a birthday with him.
Ooh.
Congratulations.
There you go.
Oh, Robbie.
Yeah.
People don't want you to get away without playing a little prophetic steps.
I feel.
Oh yeah, right.
You have to excuse my lounge attire. So I did try to MIDI this up, but I've forgotten which port the prophecy on is on my patch bay.
It doesn't
so
matter.
I'm gonna have to walk over there and do it.
Yeah. Go.
Let's hopefully it's all through.
Yeah, baby.
Wow.
And it goes on.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Unbelievable.
And the thing
Sounds
that I always
really
love about
great.
that I always forget is that the mod wheel 2 slows the steps down. I always forget that bit, and you're playing it and you think, I haven't whittled this one. What does? Oh, it slows it down. Oh, it's fantastic.
I got
Such
those
a lovely sound.
building patches on the Prophecy were incredibly complex.
Yeah, because it's only got the 2 line. It's only got the 2 line. There's so much in there, and it's the 2 line display, and you've got to do everything through pages and pages and pages.
And there was no editor at that time. We
You didn't have a dev system for that? Really?
Yeah.
You didn't have a development system for that?
No, we were doing it all on the machines.
Oh, wow.
And we had some very interesting names for that mod wheel 2.
The log?
The log.
The log.
Yeah.
That's a tepid one. And we actually had a whiteboard in the offices of Korg where we wrote this stuff down, and they didn't know what we were saying. I have a photo of it, but it's not safe for work.
I would love to, at some point, Drew, I would love to find out what some of those names are, because Log is the one that everybody used, because the Prophecy came out at about the same time that Ren and Stimpy did.
Yep.
And it's Log.
I want to go back to this this revelation of a development system. I've never heard of these before. So, Manny, you're saying that there's editors out there for synths that might not have had editors for the public.
Well, you've seen a lot of photos, both in Drew's postings, and I've posted some as well. And I know I have to imagine a lot of companies do this, but in terms of my experience with Yamaha, a lot of stuff we start voicing on is not anything that's necessarily close to the finished product. I mean, one of the first things I worked with Yamaha on from square one was the aborted V80, and literally some of the early things we were using were bits of hardware. I'm not kidding, screwed to pieces of plywood with little things coming off to CX5s, kind of thing. And even the VL1 and the VP were modules in a rack interfaced to various computer systems until they got all that stuff into custom chips and actually built into hardware. And the reason I was a little bit surprised that they didn't have something for the Prophecy is that way back when, one of the first times I got to do some stuff with Korg was back in the SynthKit days. And since I know a lot of the tech in the Z1 and the Prophecy came out of the stuff they were building in SynthKit, I would have assumed they had some evolution from that going into there. But
it was actually kind of the opposite. The first thing I got was a box and an editor. But that was like really early. It was sort of like, these are the algorithms, see what you think, what can you do with it? And then once it turned into an instrument where they had all the controllers, then you really had as far as my memory tells me, we were doing it all on the machines. There may have been an editor, and I will check with Peter Schwartz because he'll remember better than I, but I think you really had to get the scaling of the various knobs, the log, the wheels, aftertouch, and velocity. So it was really a interactive instrument, which I think was the thing that made it so cool. It was, again, really far ahead of its time as a instrument, not just a synthesizer as such. It really was a playable, tweakable device, and expressive, I guess, is the word I would look for.
Exactly that.
That's sort of the subtle thing that I think that's lost when people think about modeled instruments, because they always want to think that's going to some sort of imitative type of thing. But the whole point of modeling is much about behaviors as anything until you actually have the actual box. I mean, you mentioned that the one thing that's a drawback about the plugin is that you don't actually have the physical interface of the Prophecy itself.
Yes, that is a drag. You can, if you have a controller, you can map the things.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, at this point, I keep it pretty simple. I try to come up with really good sounds with some aftertouch, some velocity, some mod wheel, because you never know what somebody's going to have right at their controller. So doing software-based synth patches is a much different animal. I tend to go towards the simplistic and keep them so that, velocity, aftertouch, mod wheel, and pitch wheel. Generally, everybody's got that. Above that, they may not have other controllers. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So dovetailing to a question that just came up in the chat on how you have to put stuff together to get things to do nice things in a controllable standpoint. Eric Ribeiro had asked a question about VAS on Kurzweils, and one of the first programs, things that we jointly worked on was the K2000 way back early. So talk about some comments on VAST, because I was a fan.
VAST is a great word for it. I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I remember you were probably at the NAMM show where they first unveiled it, and it was really getting a lot of buzz. And I walked in there Chris Martirano was there, Joe Irardi, the guys who really, Bob Chidlaw. And I said, I really want to work with you guys on this. And they were like, well, we got people who do this. And I said, no, I really want to work with you guys on this. And they only had a couple of prototypes, and they sent one to me. And I said, look, give it to me for a week. Let me try it. And it totally blew me away. I mean, what it could do. Originally, it had some FM in it, which they had to take out.
Oh, I know. I was joking with Chris about that when they officially put it in the PC4.
But the K2000, I still think to this day, from a synthesizer, was maybe one of the most powerful devices, and sadly overlooked now. Although there's something I think called a K7000 that
2700 is the newest one.
Chris Martirano showed it to me at one of the NAMs. I guess it was in 2020, right before COVID, and it had everything. I mean, it was just like on steroids. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I mean, the fundamental engine has not changed in 25 years, and it's still totally current. I mean, the function page, the mathematical functions alone are just like you can investigate for years in all those DSP things. I was going to say, I lost the thread a little bit because I went into other stuff on it, but I periodically, there's a guy on YouTube that goes by the username Poser P, who's done some ridiculous stuff with that engine. And the 2700 is the current one. It's really tempting.
I actually just found all my Kurzweil programs in a corner of a dusty old hard drive. And I'm actually able to see the names and see that they work. And I've gotten some people to test them, and I'm hoping to get them all together, collate them, and maybe just donate them to the world and just give them away. There's hundreds. And some people said, these are really good. I said, oh, well, I don't know. I don't remember what they sound like, but there's a lot. I did a lot of analog synthesis emulation with the VAST stuff, and it was great. So I'm hoping to do that soon.
There's just one more question in the chat. Sorry, I was too involved in watching what was going on then to get control of everything. And it's from Ben from Musings. He just wants to know what you thought was the best and the worst synth interface that you had to program sounds with.
Are we talking hardware or software or both?
I think both really. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Omnisphere as being the best. When I look at that, even though it has multiple pages, I never read the manual. It just has so much there, and it's so easy to use and so well designed. You grab something, you grab an envelope. Hardware-wise, the best. Kurzweil, the K2000, the 2500, and 2600, those were really great to program as well. They were fast and pretty easy. The worst was a Digitech effects processor. I think DPS-24. It's the only device that ever came to me where I actually sent it back and said, I'm sorry, I can't figure out how this works. From a synthesizer perspective, God, what was the worst? I can't think of the worst.
Yeah,
you're too polite.
Don't want to rain on anybody's old parade.
No. Very diplomatic. No, we admire that. Absolutely. Thank you for manning the cameras for me there, Ben. Can we just do a couple more prophecy sounds? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think everybody remembers this one. And then just realised this one's my particular favourite. Love that sound.
Is that from the Modern Models card?
That's Erie comb string. Position
Erie comb
0.
string. That was only it's spelled wrong. It's spelled with 2 R's instead of 2 E's. Erie comb string.
Not always by accident.
Uh-huh.
It's a pun, Mike. It's a pun.
Sometimes the phonetic spelling was just, I'm going to go with spelling it wrong.
Hey, I love the sound.
Reed Fife is another one of my favorites.
I like anything with the word. I like anything with the word Mars in it on that synthesizer. there are a fair number of patches on Mars, and I love them all.
And there's some of the bass sounds are like really kind of
just
wet and thick and just bulbous. They're the only words I can think of. They're just big.
Ooh, misses.
I swear.
Well, I think I'm going to create bulbous bass.
Bulbous bass. There you go. You can have that one for free.
All right. I will take it. Anything for free is a good thing.
So I'm very conscious of the time. We kind of run over, and I don't want to keep I don't want to keep Manny from packing his bags for his trip tomorrow. Drew's on his kind of long vacation, so I don't want to eat up too much of these gentlemen's time. I know Mike could just stay here forever. And probably will. We'll all go home and he'll still be here.
And so's your dad.
Yeah. Question for Drew very quickly from Adamski. Were you inspired by Eric Persing at all? Did you bounce stuff off of each other during your time at Roland or doing stuff with Omnisphere?
Great question. Eric is one of the best sound designers on the planet ever.
Yeah.
And actually, no, we never were in competition. And actually, my goal was to try and make him happy. So he would come back to me and say, the first round, they're close, but they're too wet. There's too much chorus on things. Can you try this? Can you try that? And total gentleman, total pro, an inspiration. I mean,
was he right?
He was right. Yeah. There were times when you might go a little too far on certain things, and somebody said, rein it in a little bit, or it's a little too bright, or it's a little too dark, or it's a little too wet, or a little too dry, and they don't come much better than him. Jack Hotop, Manny. There's a bunch of people. Peter Schwartz. I remiss if I can't think of others. Dave Polish, who also worked at Yamaha. I mean, Zon Piles, who people might know. I mean, the funny thing is I didn't really know many of the other guys who did what I did. Manny and I became friends through a company called Sound Source Unlimited, but I didn't know where the other sounds came from. And only recently are people saying, "Oh, I contributed sounds." Houston Singletary, who works at Ableton, he did some work on the V-Synth. He said, our paths crossed, but we never knew each other.
Yeah. Houston's a great guy too.
Yes, great guy, very talented.
One last quick question from Synth Addict. I know he's asked a few. Hopefully we've got most of them in. Did you program the old Kurzweil stuff pre-K2000 by hand, or use special apps like Curlwin or special apps for other synths, maybe?
I didn't do any programming on Kurzweil prior to the 2000. So all the Kurzweil stuff was, the K2000 stuff was done right on the machine.
Cool stuff.
In fact, I would say 9 times out of 10, or even more, the development was done right on the machine. All those EMU modules, all done right on the devices.
Wow. That must have been tough on those.
You get used to where things are. I mean, I became really fast at programming the WaveStation SR, and people would say, "This is crazy convoluted." Yeah. And after a while, just like anything, it's not hard to understand once you understand it.
Yeah, true.
It's funny. Playing a front panel becomes like playing a keyboard.
It does. You get used to it.
You get the muscle memory.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, because when I first got I think it was my Roland SC88, you could actually dig into that, even though it was a fairly kind of limited general MIDI type module. There was that kind of that muscle memory thing going on where, hold shift, this, that, and you could quickly navigate around it. But nowadays I just don't have, I'm old and lazy. I just don't, I like a nice big editor, but that's not always, available. Yeah. FS1R.
I'm just going to make one comment, just an overall observation. And it goes back to almost what we started with, which was the 1010 boxes. Mm-hmm. Really have Honey, I Shrunk the Synth going on these days. I mean, tiny little devices. Some of them are great. I mean, a lot of them sound great, and they've got great hands-on control. But then you look at some of the devices, like Korg made the Triton, and they have the Nautilus, which has a touchscreen display, and then you've got the Prologue, which has tiny little, not LCD displays. What are they called? OLED displays, and they're they're like an inch square, and I'm like, this is too small. I can't see. I need something a little more. So I think we have to find a balance. I would like to try these 1010 synths because I'd like to see how the ergonomics work on a touch screen. Even though it's small, if it's really well designed, it could be fast and easy. It's just an interesting. We went from small screens, little LCDs, to big displays, and now things are shrinking.
And the Prologue's screen is gigantic compared to the one you get on the Arturia Micro Freak, which is like half the size of a postage stamp.
That's one synth I'd actually like to try, is the Micro Freak. Number of people have said to me,
it's pretty cool.
Try this thing.
They're interesting. You love them or you hate them. I had one for about a year and I worked really hard with it, but the left brain got it. The left brain was able to program it, but the right brain just never got along with it. And eventually I found it a good home with somebody who wanted one.
Good.
Cool. Just want to quickly say, Lady Aptitude in the chat says she still has her Sound Source Unlimited t-shirt. I want one of those. Apparently, you can see it in her Hall & Oates video. So go and check out Lady Aptitude's channel and have a look for that. I have got, as Manny well knows, absolutely stacks. Look at these that I've picked up online, and all of these are still in their cellophane, wrapping. So. Yeah.
Well, you know what?
Huge fan.
Somebody just auctioned off a Mario Kart 64 cartridge, still in its box, for $1 million, and a Zelda for $850,000. So if you got them in the package, don't unwrap them.
Well, what's happened is because these all came from Argent's, which was a massive music store in Denmark Street in London, and they all still have the price tickets on. And they have just been split down the sides. So the cellophane's there, but you can get the disc out, because the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that everything was intact and then archive them so that I wouldn't have to worry about using the discs and just throw them all on cartridges. But all of those were bought through the Vemia auction website, which is really great if you can get on there. And there's always a few that turn up. I'm slowly building my collection of mostly Manny Fernandez work on floppy disks. So
I hear he's
can't
pretty
get
good.
Much better. So
indeed, absolutely.
Well, he's only got the DXs there, Robbie.
Yeah, that's true. This is true. Right, I think that's a show. Gentlemen, Drew, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been enlightening. It's been fascinating, and please come back on again sometime soon to talk even more about what you're doing, and maybe we can focus on some of the instruments in a bit more depth. But thank you ever so much for coming on, for treating us to the Synthy as well. It's
thank you, Drew.
Just great. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
And just to reiterate, if you want to get hold of Drew's music, it's Drew Schlesinger radar.bandcamp.com. I've put the link in the description below the video, so it's all there. Radar Echoes is out now, and of course Summer Synthesis 1978 is still available over there as well. Pay what you want, but please do pay. That's all we ask. So thank you, Drew, for that. Thank you to also our two guest hosts. It's the first time we've ever done this with two guest hosts. To Manny Fernandez, have a fantastic holiday. Are you going anywhere pleasant?
I hear Hawaii is nice this time of year.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, enjoy it. And we will miss you. I guess you're not going to be in the chat next week. Unless
you do it from the beach. See how the Wi-Fi is down there.
Yes, yeah.
I bet it's good. I bet it's better than it is here. Well, listen, have a fantastic time, and thank you for coming. Mr. Mike Metley, Dr. Mike Metley, shall we say.
Mike, we forgot to do the Spies Like Me. Doctors.
Two doctors in the house. I mean, one is great, but two.
Well.
Fantastic.
We'll be suing each other.
Yeah. Have you got anything cool coming up? You said you're working on some material that you can't tell us about.
Well, the one thing I am allowed to say is that I am now doing some writing and editing for Arturia.
Nice.
And nothing. It's mainly updates to owner's manuals. But it's fun because they're a great bunch of people, and I'm really glad to be working with them. I'm continuing to do blog work for Samson and for Lewitt. And of course, there's the work with Bukes, which is sort of my main gig. And no, I'm still not allowed to talk about what we're working on right now. I will just say this. It has something to do with electronic music.
No way.
I know, right? Wow. But no, it's Robbie, Ben, thank you for having me back. It's always a blast. Drew, it was wonderful chatting with you. And Manny, what fun. Let's do this again sometime.
Oh, for sure. I was going to say, we can crash Ken's show and, pretend we're doing nothing for 6 hours.
I do. Ben, any gigs on the horizon? Are you busy this weekend?
Yes, I've got a gig tomorrow in sunny Bolton. That's where I'm going. Yeah,
Bolton, Lancashire.
I'm doing that. I got the V-Synth out, plonked it in the background there because I think somebody in the chat asked where it had gone, since I put that.
There it is. It's taking a break on your soft armchair.
Yeah, I'll never get rid of the V-Synth. I've just got to find somewhere to put it. Things have got a bit crazy in here, so... V-Synth's here for good. Apart musically, I'm unfortunately still on vocal duty, so I'm gonna mix an album's worth of songs in the immediate future. The music side of it's almost sorted. It's really just like layering the vocals over the top, really. But I don't like doing that, so I'm not really looking forward to it.
The other thing we've got to do is get you a boom arm.
I know.
Because I've seen you look like a football commentator.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good match. Manny put in a great performance. Dr. Mike came in with a couple of crackers, but in the end, Drew kept a clean sheet.
Brilliant. You've missed your calling. You've missed your calling.
Water in the back of the net.
No, we absolutely need to get you, because I've been looking to get a new one because this was a little bit kind of bouncy and wonky. So
it's flaccid.
Yes, that's
flaccid. It won't stay erect.
For that.
Yes. There's a pill. So thank you ever so much. I can't think what I'm doing. I'm writing stuff for Sound on Sound. I'll just finish something, so that's coming. I'm recording a great podcast again, like Manny. I can't say who it is, but I'm recording that on Tuesday, and that'll be coming out on the Sound on Sound podcast channel very soon. I hope there's a couple of new ones on their way. And I think that's kind of about it. And beta testing a bunch of stuff, lots of new cool things coming in my inbox. So lots of nice things there. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. You gentlemen and ladies and everyone else in between. You make this show. You're the reason we do this. So thank you ever so much to everyone that's made a donation through the super chats. Thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated. That'll buy Ben his new arm. So we'll do that. So thank you ever so much. Yeah, and if you're watching on catch up, So you couldn't make it live because we understand that, we don't coincide with many people's awake time, particularly on the other side of the globe. Although I did see Australia's finest Michael in the chat room earlier, so he's either got up early or stayed up very late. But if you're watching on Catch Up, thank you ever so much for joining us and bringing us back up onto your YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. Let me just tell you who we've got coming up, because we've got some great people, and we've added some since the last time, which is always remarkable. I can't believe we get so many amazing guests. Next week, we've got Drew Schlesinger's friend, Rich Hilton. It will be joining us on the 11th.
Wonderful.
So, Rich will be coming on, and he's insisted that we drag Kent along as well, so that he can have a go at him. So we've got Rich on the 11th. The following week on the 18th, we've got Adamski A. You might have seen him in the chat room. Adam is a fantastic synth designer, and he's got a couple of products that he's working on. We want to know all about those. So he's going to be coming on February 18th. I know I say this every week. February 25th, we hope to have a really, really special guest, but unfortunately we cannot say who it is just yet. But fingers crossed we'll be able to break that news to you in the next week or so. March 4th, Dave Bryce of Cloud Microphones and Reverb Foundry and many others besides will be joining us on March 4th. Dan Goldstein from Cherry Audio, March 11th. We've got Starsky Carr coming up. He's a YouTube synth reviewer and one of the best ones out there. Great quality stuff that he puts out. So we've got Starsky coming on March the 18th. Excuse me, March 25th. The legend that is Eric Norlander will be joining us on March 25th. Yeah, really looking forward to that. April 1st, it could only be the one and the only Gaz Williams will be joining us April 1st. What a fantastic guest he will be. Kelly Marie will be joining us on April 8th. And this is news just in. Tara Bush of I Speak Machine, whose new album comes out on April 22nd, will be joining us live from California and telling us all about the creation of her new album. It's out now. The album is out in April, called War. The single, The Metal in My Head, is out, I think, yesterday. Go and check it out. It's fantastic. Really good. It really, really is great. Really good. But Tara and her husband Math, who hails from Wales, they will both be joining us hopefully on April 15th to tell us all about that. And then the legend that is Michael Whalen will be joining us, hopefully, fingers crossed, live from EMIAP in Philadelphia, where he will be launching his new album there and on our show as well. So we're really excited about that. And if you haven't checked it out already, on our Facebook page and also on Michael's page as well, he posted a 1-minute clip of him jamming on his new to him, Yamaha DX1, and it's gorgeous. It's just fantastic. April 29th, I'm not going to be around, so I don't know if we're going to have any guests on that show. Hopefully we will, but there's nothing there. But then May 6th, we're going to be joined by Andrew Longhurst, and you might not know the name, but he's worked with everyone and anyone, and is also now in the space of developing music for virtual reality environments, and he's been in that game literally since day one in the last century. So really looking forward to getting Andrew on. You'll recognise Andrew if you've watched any of Kent Spong's show, because he regularly kind of joins on there. Talking of other shows, we must give them all a plug before we go, because they give us a plug too, so it's only fair. Tomorrow, Randy is on from about 12:45 p.m. UK time, so work that out wherever you are. So Randy is on with his show on Saturday. On Sunday, you've got Jamie with GeoSynths at 6 p.m. UK. You've got Dominic, Mr. Wiggly, and he'll be talking to our friend Jim Glue at 7 p.m. right after Jamie's show on Sunday. And then, of course, there's Nick Sonic State on the Wednesday, and hopefully Gaz Williams will be on in the evening as well. I think I've got everyone. I don't think I've forgotten anyone. So go and watch all of those people. Great shows, great content. We're all a big community, and have fun with those. We'll be back same time, same place next week with Rich Hilton. Until then, I'm going to go and have myself a large glass of wine. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Manny. Thank you ever so much, Drew.
Thank you.
Cheers,
so much.
Ben, as always, and take great care, everyone. Please stay
safe and well.
Stay safe and healthy indeed, and be careful, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.